And in the beginning of everything, in a dark place, and completely exhausted, resembling a dungeon, the Minotaur is walking around while our protagonist is also completely exhausted, and he keeps cursing that wreck, and those monsters keep threatening, and he keeps walking all the way, leaving bloodstains on the ground. Then he asks how that old man do this to, realizing that it wasn't like that he should die. And then a huge snake with hair flying towards him appears in front of him, and the protagonist realizes that he's going to die like trash. The protagonist then introduces himself as Sojo Ria, 38 years old, and this is the day he believes he will die. If he were to talk about where everything went wrong, he would likely have to go back 15 years to the year 2025, where tombs appeared all over the world, causing earthquakes as they appeared. Inside these tombs were things called relics. These relics were the cause of the world's transformation, and just like in legends, sagas, myths, folklore, and tale, these relics possessed great power. The relics that appeared in his world were no different. They had the power to grant various abilities. Because of this, stories of how people's lives changed after obtaining these relics spread throughout the world, and people began dedicating their lives to the search for them. He began this journey a little later than most, but in the end, he finally found an incredible relic, the Archaic Relic, which gave him great knowledge about tombs and other important information about relics. He hit the jackpot, because with this relic, he could finally put an end to his miserable life and start a new life as a great relic. But he thought it was too late, as a new law had spread throughout the world, and the scoundrels who had collected various relics began to monopolize them and create a new society with laws that would limit the use of relics. The only option left for him was to work for these power-hungry scoundrels. Because of his good excavation skill, he was hired by a large company called KT. The owner of this company, Wang Taijong, told him that the work would not be easy, and because of this, his work was extremely difficult. He often had to get his hands dirty, and one could say that his job was that of a cheat, thief, and spy, but he was primarily a tomb raider. He improved his skill and managed to enter restricted areas to steal the relics that others had found. The tomb raiding group he led produced impressive results, and years later, CEO Quan began to become the world's strongest relic user, but all thanks to relics they stole for him. The more CEO Quan became known, the more he was despised by others. They called him trash work for a dick. Despite all this, he continued working hard. After all, what else could he do to survive in a world blinded by the power of relic? But to be honest, he never expected it to end like this, because the mission he's on now, it was a trap set by CEO Quan, and that wretched man deliberately put him and his companions on a suicide mission just because their skills were exceptional and he felt threatened by it. That shameless bastard decided to get rid of it. The protagonist is almost dying when attacked by that snake, so he grabs a rock and throws it at the thing, asking if it wasn't satisfied after eating all his colleagues, saying it can come because he's going to rip its guts out. And that damned Quan Taejong, even if he dies and becomes a ghost, he'll do everything he can to end his life. But then someone speaks to the protagonist, saying he's very noisy, and the boy is quite surprised. The snake stops its attack to listen to where the voice is coming from, and the protagonist asks the voice what it said. The voice is surprised that he can hear it, but the protagonist questions if it thinks it's the first time he's heard the voice of a relic, saying he doesn't know which god it belongs to. It belonged, but since he's asking for a good deal, it's best to get rid of that snake and let him leave. But then the relic asks if he really thinks he can survive with his body, since the protagonist has already lost almost both legs. He says his body is now only half, and he's trying his best to hold on until the end of his life, but it won't last long. The protagonist realizes the relic is right, and she speaks to him again, saying that this is the end of his miserable life. Even so, he possesses exceptional talent, but it seems he started a little too late and won't even be able to take advantage of the power he has gained. But the protagonist tells her not to talk as if he knows him, asking if she really thinks he wants to live like this, becoming frustrated with his life and starting to say he's getting angry. He'll only think about it again, because that wretched old man will do everything to kill him. Then the relic says he amuses her, saying it would be a real waste to see him die. Talent. Then a flash appears, and the protagonist questions what she's doing. The relic says it will give him a chance, and the protagonist sees that it's a bird. A four-eyed raven appears before him, saying they'll see if he can truly conquer the king's throne this time. The protagonist is surprised, saying he doesn't believe in this king business, questioning what it is and what rank, hero rank or perhaps a divine rank relic, and that it also looks like a raven. However, he looks down and sees that both his legs are there, and is surprised that they suddenly rise. He notices he's completely fine, wondering what happened as all his wounds are gone. But when he looks to the side, he's with several other people in an office, and they're looking at. It's a police station, and he questions what's happened. The man in front of him asks what the protagonist is murmuring, saying he's asking for his ID, and if he thinks they have the knife. Everything happens, and the protagonist feels it, and the man asks his name, and then he starts wondering if the crow did it, saying that maybe it was a dream or a hallucination, and he doesn't know what it was. But that policeman gets angry with, telling him to say his name quick, saying that he's going to go crazy, saying that he's going to end this quick. so that he can go home. But the other man says they'd already given up, because it seems this year will be known as the year nobody goes home, the miserable 2025, and the protagonist is even more shocked when he hears it's 2025, because he's sure they're not in 2025. However, he notices it's actually January 1st, 2025, questioning what's happened. But then he notices that the boy next to him looks familiar, because he remembers a boy who got drunk and started fighting, and he ended up in a fight with, ending up at the police station. He thinks he can't believe it, wondering if it's real, and if he's gone back 15 years. Then he hears the Raven's voice again, saying he wants to see if he can really conquer the king's throne this time. And he's shocked, because if they're in January 2025, then the world was still at peace before the relics started appearing, and there's still time until the relics, if divine ranked relics also appear. And if that's the case, then he'll be able to collect them all at once, since his knowledge and memory from before remain intact, and he can start collecting the relics before everyone else. And that makes him more than happy, because now he'll be able to monopolize everything. And after the world went mad with the power of the relic, he believed that nothing else could surprise him. But he thinks it's going to be a day full of surprises, because to begin with, he never believed that there would be a tomb that would make even an experienced excavator like him tremble with fear. And secondly, being sent on this mission was a trap that wretched Quanta and John set. And finally, right after he died, he suddenly went back 15 years, and he says he doesn't know how it was possible, but it seems like it's going to be the biggest chance he'll ever have in his life, and he can get all the relics before everyone else. But the woman next to him questions if he's listening, asking what the thing is. He was completely distracted and didn't even pay attention to the police officers asking if he really thought this was a joke. After all, he hit his little baby, and his little boy is still in school, questioning what they're going to do if he's caused them trauma, asking if the protagonist will take responsibility, saying he can pay him money right now or go to jail. But the protagonist thinks she's too annoying, saying thinks he'll have to deal with this first, because even though it was 15 years ago, he still remembers it like it was yesterday, because that boy wanted to pick a fight and the boy wouldn't leave him alone, so he ended up slapping him. But that boy must have planned it from the beginning, since he had barely touched and he was already on the ground. He ended up having to apologize and beg them to reduce the amount of money they asked for, and he begins to remember, because his elf now has no money at all, and his tools and his archaic relic are also gone, and he thinks he has no income at all. So how is he going to collect all the relics and since he thought he had something waiting for him, this can all be a joke. But the woman asks how he dares to ignore her, raising her hand to hit him, saying that if someone speaks to him, then he should pay attention. However, both the boy and the policeman pay attention, and the protagonist quickly turns around, grabbing the woman's hand, and is surprised that he blocked, even wondering if it's because he still has his knowledge and experience, and with that his fighting skills Methy were fighting, and he thinks this is an extra for him, telling her to calm down, saying that his son started fight. Furthermore, she asks if he doesn't think they're both being ridiculous. However, he thinks for a moment and says he thinks the saying like mother, like son is true. But the boy gets up, asking what he said, and lunges at the protagonist, saying he was thinking of being cool and letting him go. But when he throws a punt, the protagonist dodges, grabs the boy's hand, and throws him to the ground, completely dominating. The boy screams, saying this is it. The protagonist thinks his body is certainly lighter than before, and he thinks it's because he hasn't experienced the side effect using the relic. Then the police officers tell the protagonist to stop, asking what they're thinking, because they're causing a commotion at the police station. However, the protagonist says he doesn't have any money to give, so they can send him to jail right away, and he doesn't care. The woman asks what he's talking about, asking he's crazy after all. How could he prefer to keep his criminal record rather than make a deal with? He says it's all right, telling him to make himself at home. After all, he made a big mistake. However, the protagonist questions this talk about his criminal record, saying that this crap doesn't even matter anymore, because when the relics appear, the world will become a chaotic, lawless land. But even so, for now, he's still in prison, and he thinks it's good that he can fight better. But that still won't be enough, because he has to hurry and find some source of income to pay for his excavation. He wonders what he's doing until he smells something and asks what it is. When he looks ahead, he sees an inscription with his name, and he questions why that text is floating. He keeps asking if he's going crazy, and he even hits his head because he thinks he's already insane. But it really is his name, with the title Tomb Robber. A dirty thief can't even use a gun. The protagonist notices that relics aren't the only things that could cause something like this, questioning if that body is responsible. He starts yelling at the body, asking if it's watching him now, asking what the hell it did to him. Then, other windows appear in front of the protagonist, and he's even more surprised because those basic tomb raiding skills are now at rank F, allowing him to observe his surroundings up to 1 meter. He even wonders if this is a game skill window, cursing the body he just took down, asking if it really thinks his life's just a game. Then another window appeared, and he questions what it is now, and it's a new quest that he's trying to recover cover the 4 basic skills from the Tomb Raid, because to become a complete Tomb Raid, he needs to awaken the 4 dormant skills. He sees that a skill window is now a quest window, and one of the guards questions what's happening, asking him to be quiet, which he simply agrees to. He thinks to himself that only he can see the status window, even though it's so bright. He finds it interesting because, exactly as it says in the skill window, he can see almost anything within a 1-meter radius in detail, and this skill is exactly the same as his archaic relic. He wonders if all the skills he had before have become like this, and if the skills are now at 1 to 4, then he thinks he can get even more of them, and if the skills are like this, so there's no reason for him to go after his archaic relic, and that's very useful, but he questions what that crow relic is planning, since relics generally don't like help. Then a guy arrives calling John, and the protagonist is surprised. That guy gets him out of jail, saying that the boy does this all the time, and that he shouldn't have been the one to go to jail. But anyway, he'll take care of this accident for him, so the protagonist shouldn't worry so much. The protagonist just thanks his friend, and he talks about Detective Kim Jong-ho, the older brother who took care of him when he was an orphan, and he treated him like a real brother. The detective asks what's wrong, trying to see if he's really thanking him this time, and thinks the experience in jail must have been frightening for the boy. The protagonist says he doesn't remember him looking so young 15 years ago, so he says he has something to ask the detective, questioning if there haven't been any reports of paranormal activity or a story about supernatural power, and in that he questions what the hell that is, even asking if the protagonist is drunk, and says that actually, now that he thinks about it, his wife certainly has some supernatural power, because he doesn't know how she managed to find her secret hideout so easily, and the protagonist immediately thinks that no relic user has appeared, but the detective says that in any case, he should go home and rest, because even though the tombs are already appearing in several places, they haven't caused any significant problems since relic users don't exist. In other words, now is the perfect time to act, since he can use his ability, and he has a great chance of achieving his goal. And then he thinks that the only problem is that he has no money at all, and at the beginning the best relics appeared somewhere in Europe or America, so how is he going to pay for his trip to those places? However, someone arrives calling Jorian and questions why he's wandering around not working. Those 4 guys don't seem like good, and they say that since the protagonist is the youngest, he should be the one putting in the most effort at work. But as soon as he sees these guys, he says he's found his source of income. One of them asks if Jorian has no sense of respect, saying that if he saw these young men, then he should be bowing down now. The protagonist says that the jerk's name is Park Kyung-tae. He was originally a street thief, but now works as an art specialist. He works with his older sister, Park Kyung-jo, and the two run an art gallery. They're useless, causing trouble, and when he was in school he needed money quickly, so he ended up working for them for a while, and he was planning to work a little and then leave, but those bastards wouldn't let him go so easily. They made him work for them until he was around 20 years old. He's like he's useless too, and he did his job like everyone else. But the question is, did he receive the same respect as everyone else? Saying no, not at all, and they kept a noose around his neck, threatening, treating him like an animal. Then the blonde guy asks why he's not answering, saying he's going to need a beating. But the protagonist punches him in the face without no left, throwing him to the ground near the other. The protagonist calls them all over, telling them to tell his boss that he's tired of working. Then his brother asks about, saying he didn't bring him, that he's an idiot. The protagonist says that before he leaves, he also wants his back pay and severance pay, saying they can all hand them over. Then the two look at him and start laughing, saying that you think you get everything when you live long enough, asking what he said again, and lunging at the protagonist with a punch. But the protagonist retaliates first, hitting him in the middle of the face, then down to the side of his nose, then grabbing the top of his head and delivering a knee strike. They start screaming, questioning what's happening to that guy and why he reacted so quick. One of them doesn't ask if he wasn't bad at fighting, but the other tells them to shut up and attack together. However, the protagonist first elbows one and kicks the other in the face, knocking everyone down. The blonde man gets up again, questioning how the protagonist ended up like this, and the protagonist just enjoys the situation, telling them to keep panicking because this is the result of him fighting for 15 years, asking if they're finished, saying he feels bad for them because the world will only get harder from now on. And he says he's glad his body can move like it used to, when his current body isn't strong enough to withstand these attacks, and he has to end this soon. Kyung-tae starts complaining because they took him in and raised him as if he were one of their own, and this is how he repays them, asking if he really has to kill to wake him up. But the blonde man talks to Kyung-tae, saying that he has to be careful when using that knife, but then he says he doesn't care. But the blonde man says that this knife will be used in a trade, so what will happen if it gets damaged? And the protagonist is surprised looking at the knife, noticing that it's of the protagonist, questioning why that damned person has a relic, thinks it's not so surprising after all, since most relics create giant tombs to attract, but some relics prefer to hide within human society, and he thinks that in any case, soon it will be. Kyung-tae lunges at, trying to kill him, but the protagonist quickly gets out of the way, grabbing his hand and placing the tip of the knife against Kyung-tae's neck. He says that Kyung-tae is brave for pointing that at, and then he starts asking him to wait. However, both are shocked, and the protagonist says he will take good care of it. Kyung-tae starts to get upset that his knife slipped from his hand, but the protagonist tells them to look and learned that he says that's how you really use that knife. And when he invokes its power, his eyes begin to glow, and he finds it interesting that this relic allows him to see the inner workings. Everyone rushes towards the protagonist, but he disappears from their sight, dodging the attacks, passing right. The two don't even see him pass, only feeling his body being cut. The protagonist says it seems to have a power of possession as well, which is quite convenient. Everyone is even more shocked, as they only bled while he disappeared. The protagonist tells them to stop whining, as the cut wasn't even deep, but if they still refuse to give him money, things will get very ugly from now on, ordering them to hand it over if they don't want to die. And with that, they simply agree, and sometime later, Kyung-jo is yelling at, questioning what they said, because Jo Hyun, I beat them up and still took the money, asking if they really thought that would be a plausible excuse. And she tells her brother that it makes no sense at all, but he says he doesn't know what's going on either. And that damn guy didn't even know the basics of fighting but now he's completely changed, and even his eyes give off a sense of danger. And she's totally disoriented, asking how much they ended up losing. And he says they lost all the money in their account, and the product that was going to be used in the exchange. And she freaks out, saying that they're saying they lost the Buddha statue, and he says that the protagonist said they didn't have much money, asking if they don't have anything else, and everyone tells him that this is all they have, but the protagonist looks at it, saying that if they search them, find anything, everyone will die, and all three are terrified. And then Kyung-tae takes him to the Buddha statue, and the protagonist questions what it is, because it looks incredibly expensive, but then the Kyung-tae begs him not to take it, but the protagonist says that if the word please came out of his mouth, then it must be very valuable, saying he'll keep it and take it away. Kyung-tae asks him to wait, calling the protagonist back, and asking him to take anything but that. Then Kyung-jo orders them to retrieve it, and he doesn't quite understand. She yells for them to retrieve the statue immediately, and they take it to an antique shop. They say that the statue is probably not worth even 50,000, and suggest that it might be better to put it as decoration in his house. The protagonist says that's impossible, but the man tells him to believe it, because just by looking at it can tell that nobody will buy it. The protagonist finds this strange, because that wretched Park Kyung-tae was acting as if it were worth millions, but in the end it's just trash. When he leaves, he thinks that he also felt like it was something valuable, wondering if he threw it away wrong for not having his relic marked. So at one point, he leaves that statue, and a window of statues appears right in front of the protagonist. This is his activated spying ability, and he detects a suspicious essence coming from the Buddha statue. He wonders if there's something inside the statue, saying he understands, but they didn't remove the window from the front. He realizes it was something, because he knew it was something else. There's no way Park Kyung-tae would go crazy over a 50,001 statue. He wants to see what's inside, so he breaks the thing open. Inside, there's a kind of liquid, and he questions what it is, because it looks like a liquid drug. Usually a few drops of this are put in cigarettes people smoke. He thinks that it's usually very expensive, and those bastards, he wonders if they're drug dealers too. Now that he's thought about it properly, they have a lot of artwork, so what if it all contains drug? He calls the detective, wondering if the reward for reporting drug traffic is around 100 million. Meanwhile, Kyung-ju is in deep trouble, telling the president that this isn't the case, saying he assures her it's not because the goods aren't ready, and she's just trying to stay on alert for a while since they suspect they're being watched. But he starts yelling at, and she says she understands, apologizing for what happened and saying she'll contact again soon, but she starts cursing. She asks him why he would think of taking all the money, saying she hopes he rots in hell. But when she looks back, she sees those three arriving and asking where they were, and exploring if they recovered the statue. But Kyung-tae says that they were discovered and are screwed, and she asks what has happened. Then the detective says that they received a tip that they are not only smuggling drugs, but distributing them as well. Then Kyung-jo questions how so, because their business is only with works of art. They are ordinary people who follow the law. But he asks why criminals always say the same thing when they are caught red-handed, saying that it's quite funny, saying that they also have some evidence, and they know that this is not all they have, and they probably have more in the warehouse. And she sees that she has been caught, noticing that those bastards also know about the warehouse. That Viking Kyung-do, but it's all right, because the warehouse has storage room, all with password, and she says who has no idea what he's talking, and if they don't have any proof, he shouldn't be throwing false accusations at innocent, and just because they're police officers doesn't mean they have the right to interfere in other business. But then, the detective picks up his communique, and it's said that the 600 works of art found inside Wang Xiang's art gallery have all been checked, and they found drugs inside all of them. So she asks them to wait a bit, asking if they opened all the storage rooms, saying that's impossible because all the storage rooms have different passwords. And he says that's true, but they have their way, and it was good to have someone undercover helping them too. And then another one talks to Jo Hyun, saying that it seems there's a storage room that hasn't been opened yet, and the protagonist asks if that's true and goes to open it while the policeman says he's really impressed, asking how he managed to open all the storage, and the protagonist says he has a good memory. And he says that's true, that this memory is exceptional, and it can be said that it's one of his few talents. And it was because of that Young-jo wanted to use him later in that part, because when he worked in that warehouse, he had difficulty first time. Since all the storage rooms had different passwords back, and he didn't find it suspicious, but it became annoying. So he memorized them all, and never imagined that it would be useful. But he thinks everything is going as planned, and he will also receive his cash reward, which means he will finally have some money, and he will be able to start collecting the relics soon. And then the policeman tells them to take a look at, noticing that there are more of those drugs there, and so they think that those bastards are very greedy, and they tell the protagonist that he did a good job. He says he's happy to help, but that they can't ask for a favor, and meanwhile, Kyung-jo is yelling that this doesn't make sense, demanding they release him, and as a detective, he answers a call from the protagonist, and tells him what he wants. Then he asks the boss to wait a bit after talking to the boy, saying that his assistant said he wants to talk. Then he talks to Kyung-jo, saying that's why, that she should have treated him better, because if he worked, she should have paid him on time, and she recognizes whose voice it is, saying that it was all his fault, and he tells her that she should have changed the passwords a little while ago, but anyway, she should enjoy her time in jail. And she doesn't even believe it. Talking to Joe, the protagonist, returning home, still finds the experience relaxing until he receives a message from the detective. The message tells him he did well and is proud of him, adding that he'll soon receive around 100 million won as a reward. The detective tells the boy it's best not to waste it all on frivolous things, urging him to learn to spend wisely. The protagonist realizes the detective is always worried about, but he doesn't need to worry anymore. He secured his initial capital and can now begin searching for the tomb. He'll find the relics before that damned Kwon Taejong does. The detective tells him to wait, but when he notices something nearby, he questions where his house is, as there's only a huge mound of earth in front of him. The protagonist explains that his apartment was completely covered by a giant tomb, definitely created by a relic. Everyone is complaining about what's happening, and everyone panicked. Even toddlers were running around in all that chaos, and the protagonist slipped away, thinking it didn't surprise him, as it was quite normal for everyone to be panicked because the relics and tombs had enormous power, causing a lot of fusion. Thinking about it, he remembered receiving a call from his roommate around that time, who said the apartment had disappeared and asked what he was going to do. At that moment, he didn't know what was happening because he was still enslaved by King Joe Park. When he finished his work and returned home, everything was back to normal. If that's the case, it means someone managed to defeat that tomb before, and whoever was responsible must be there someone. He thinks he can't lose to that person because that relic is his. However, he hears someone asking a guard not to shoot him, and the protagonist recognizes the voice. It's his roommate, Don Hyun. The soldier then tells him to shut up, asking. He seems to be joking, telling him to stop asking so many questions and go back to where he was, but the protagonist arrived, kicking the soldier in the face and knocking him out. Don Hyun is surprised that the protagonist did, but Hyun questions how he could point a gun at a civilian, talking to his friend who has been around for a while, but he doesn't understand anything after all they saw each other early. The protagonist says that he hasn't changed at all, but when the soldier starts to help the protagonist, he asks if he's had time to think properly, and then he apologizes, saying he lost his temper. The protagonist then says it doesn't matter, asking if he can explain what's happening and why the army is there, asking if it's usually the police who don't deal with problems. He suspects something is wrong, questioning why so many soldiers were sent. The protagonist then asks if they're trying to enter the tomb, but the soldier says that's confidential information. The protagonist disagrees, saying he needs to know the reason, as he understands the government might be his rival. He wonders if the country already knew about the tomb's existence, but the protagonist tells the soldier to leave. That's nonsense, because if he lives there, then he doesn't have the right to know. And he needs to know because the entire army is there, armed on top of everything else, saying he thinks he still doesn't understand the situation he's in now. But he's making a big mistake, asking if he knows he can report him to the authority for pointing a gun at a civilian, then tells him to stop making things worse than they already are. And he just wants to know the reason. And so the soldier says that they are trying to blow that thing up and excavate what's inside, and tells him not to worry about being in danger because they have surrounded the area. And the protagonist thinks to himself about them blowing it up, thinking it's impossible to open a tomb like because the soldier says that they even brought in foreign specialists. Then he assures him that everything will be fine, and upon hearing about these foreign specialists, he thinks that now everything makes sense. Thank you, soldier, for telling him, because now he feels safe and says that he should continue his good work, and leaves. Then Don Rio asks if he has finished talking, asking what the soldier said, and the protagonist tells him to do nothing and stay there, leaving his roommate behind. He keeps calling Joe Hyun, but only receives a silent response from the protagonist, and ends up noticing that he's acting a bit strange today. Meanwhile, the protagonist circles the entire area. Behind the tomb, a woman looks around and makes a call, asking if they're sure the Korean government still doesn't know anything about the tomb. She's Linda Walk, a CIA agent. The man on the phone confirms he's certain, questioning why she keeps asking. Linda says the number of soldiers there doesn't make sense, and the man says it's probable because they want to do their best to help. He adds that she should avoid asking this in public, as there are people who understand English. He then asks how the mission is going, and she says the explosives will be detonated soon and everything is is going well. He then tells him to make sure he stays focused until the end, to investigate the tomb carefully and if possible, recover the relic. She simply agrees, but then someone comes to talk, and here it is Abe Kiyoshi, a member of the Japanese excavation, and she is surprised to see him. He questions why all the surprise, saying that it's more normal for him to be there than for her, asking if she doesn't think so. After all, they are a neighboring country, so it makes sense. But she is from America, very far away, and he says that they are very devoted to continuing their theft mission, and she doesn't like this talk at all. She says that they are simply recovering the relics to be delivered to the International Police Association, and says that their mission is focused on maintaining peace and conducting safe experiments on these relics. So the guy says that's a good idea, because if they follow that rule, then they can also ask keep the relics, if they promise to use them safe, saying that they all know they wouldn't allow that. But she asks why he thinks they should trust what he said, but he says that it doesn't even matter, and they're both doing the same thing now, so they'll stop this pointless discussion, but he can guarantee that the relic will be his, and Linda says that he's confident, and he wants to see if it will happen. But while the two are talking, the protagonist is watching from afar, questioning what's going on, since they're talking quite a bit, asking if it's not the CIA and the Japanese excavation. He says that even though the tombs have already started appearing all over the world, the existence of the relics and tombs was initially considered only omen, and at that time, some countries began to understand the true purpose of the relics' existence. Among these countries, the first to realize this were the United States and Japan, and they began conducting secret research on the relic and stealing others found in other countries. He gets very angry with all of them, challenging them to try and get them before, saying that this relic is his. But he questions why they're just chatting, saying they don't have time to waste. Then he's surprised because they said they were going to blow up the tomb, asking if they're waiting for that to happen first. And he notices that they're just amateur, and so he goes ahead. But when he looks at the ground, he sees some writing and thinks that's where it is. And these runes are called rune glyph, and the relics are funny entities. They like to present themselves that way and hope to be noticed by the world. And it's as if they think they are the main characters of fantasy world. But then someone asks what that is near the protagonist, saying that it's quite disturbing, with that room full of strange inscriptions, if it were a ritual. And the protagonist says that if you can decipher these glyphs, then they will tell you where the entrance to the tomb is and what kind of traps are inside. And he practically says everything in detail, but he says that it can be considered a trap, since most people can't decipher the glyphs correct, but he can decipher them. So he says that he discovered where the entrance is. But then a raven window appears in front of him, and he gains the exceptional ability he unlocked. He has acquired a new ability, awakening the basic skill of tomb rating, linguistics rank F, which allows him to understand, learn, and conceptualize any language. He can hear the voices of relics, communicate, and he also has the highest proficiency in deciphering chronic glyph. He questions what happened now, surprised by everything, and thinks it's great, but asks them to please remove that window from his face because he can't see anything. He only needs to unlock 2 more abilities now, and he'll be complete. He starts cleaning the floor in front of him, as if there really is something, acting crazy to everyone around. Then he goes to another spot by the edge of a river, finding yet another of those clues the relic left behind. He's surprised to be there, saying it's time to go in, correctly guessing that letter, and with that, the tomb explodes. Moments before, when he guessed that letter, a notification screen appeared saying that it detected an intense aura coming towards him, and that aura came out of the ground in front of the protagonist, and everyone around could see it, even from a distance. And the Japanese guy questions what the hell that is. Then, one of Linda's men approached, saying that it seems the tomb entrance has opened. Everyone is surprised that the entrance is illuminated by that light, and the Japanese man runs out the window. He tells the soldiers that they should stay there, as a second explosion might occur, so they need to make sure no civilians approach. Linda calls him a big liar, and he says that if those guys interfere with work, things will be more difficult, and she should know that. He asks why she's putting all the blame on. When they arrive at the location, only the hole is there, with no one else around. The Japanese man says it's too bright, and he can't see the bottom. Linda picks up a rock and throws it in, hoping to hear a noise. They notice that the hole seems to have water at the bottom and appears to be quite. The Japanese man thinks that if that's the case, he should jump in, and she tells him to wait a moment. However, the protagonist, inside, hears the commotion approaching and realizes they are indeed coming after. As he walks, he reads everything along the way, and he already knows what to do. He says he's going to make things a little difficult for them, saying it's time to activate the trap. The Japanese man notices it's salt water after jumping in, and Linda says he didn't even think before acting, which is what intelligence is all about. He gets angry, but then they hear a noise, and she asks what it is. The Japanese man notices something approaching, and a huge burst of water comes towards them. They question what the hell it is, and where all that water came, but end up being swept away by the whirlwind. The protagonist, in turn, finally finds what he was there to find. As he walks forward, he arrives at a lake and says that's all he has with. He decides he'll have to use it, throwing a relic into the lake, and the lake becomes quite calm until a huge white snake emerges from it, speaking to the protagonist and asking which poor soul dropped their belongings. from it. The snake orders him to answer immediately, as she possesses a gold dagger and a silver one, asking which one belongs to. The protagonist replies that this is an easy question because if the relic of this tomb is called the gold and silver axes, it is based on a famous urban legend originating from one of Aesop's fable, Mercury the Wood. He says that this legend is known in other countries as well, so even foreigners would easily pass this but it's too late, and this relic is hid. The protagonist says that neither of the relics is hid, and the snake becomes frightened, asking if that one is hid. He says that it is indeed, and if he answers correct, he will receive his weapon and the gold and silver axes. But the snake asks if it can see first this is indeed his dagger, and the snake says it can, and when the protagonist reaches for the dagger, he simply starts attacking the snake, cutting part of its mouth, and it questions what he was doing, asking why he was doing that, even though he was so close to completing his test, and he tells it to shut up because he never trusted the relics, and even if he passed this test, there's no guarantee that it would give him a normal reward. And these relics are all the same, and who guarantees that the reward he's going to give her won't turn her into a psychopath killer, and she questions how that's possible, as a human could know about. The protagonist explains that the original owner of the golden and silver axes gradually transformed to a serial killer, and the number of victims because of this relic was enormous. He claims to already know she was planning to reward him with a fake relic that has a curse inside. It's quite ironic that the objective of this test is about honesty. Then he lunges at the snake, attacking it once more and making the monster scream in pain. The protagonist orders it to pay for its sin, and she questions if he truly believes that by doing this, he'll gain the right to use it. The protagonist explains that after passing through a tomb full of traps, if he can pass the relic's test, he will be rewarded. By passing so many tests and overcoming all the adversity, the relic will grant the user various ability, because the relic and the user will be in a bond of mutual. This is what they considered a normal relation, one that a human and a relic should share. But the relics always harbored a deep hatred for human, and their purpose is to bring suffering. After spending some time with the relics, people will gradually become ill. Because of this, users who possessed healing relics had great power and authority, and this was another reason why Shaun exploited one. He then says that he doesn't need this so-called mutual relationship with his relic, and then the relic starts saying that it hurts while the protagonist continues stabbing. Jorian then says that he will see how much that relic can endure, because he will dominate and force it to submit to. As he continues to impose his dominance over, the relic begins to get nervous, and the protagonist says that you need talent in some weird area if you want to use the relic, and if you don't have any talent, then you will be affected. According to scholars, talents are classified into three main groups. The first group is socialization, which is the ability to form a positive relation with a relic. The second group is domination, which is the power to charismatically make the relic obey. The third group is compatibility, meaning the strong affinity between the relic and the user, as if they were made for each other. For example, if someone uses an instrumental relic, in most cases, most people would greatly increase their socialization. This is the easiest of the three ways and still allows them to gain all the benefits of the relic. However, this is a brutal path, because when relics begin to become friendly with their owner, they will start to release their poisonous aura, which will make their owners sick. So he says that this time, he won't use the socialization, because socialization is only for the losers they find around, ordering them to submit to him immediately. Then the relic continues screaming, and the protagonist says that if she doesn't submit, he will cut her into pieces, asking if she really thinks he won't do that. She complains about how he can be doing this, because she thought humans desired it, but then the relic actually falls apart and a liquid comes out of it until the protagonist finally succeeds. His golden axe, and when he looks at Itadu, the crow, speaks to him, telling him that he is the one who survived a tomb, unlocking a title and discovering a new skill. He awakens the basic skill of tomb raiding, rank F tomb excavation, and thus completes another of the skills he's missing. He is quite surprised, as he now only needs to unlock one more, and he wonders what he has to do to unlock another one. But then another notification appears. He has the title of relic user. Unlocking this title also increases his domination, and relic domination is at A+, oppressive level, and relic socialization is at D- coercive. He speaks to the crow, asking how this was considered abusive to the relic, but he just lets it go, as it doesn't matter if his socialization talent increased, because he doesn't need it anyway. At that moment, both the Japanese and the beautiful woman arrive, saying they found a lake, and they say it's exactly like the prophecy he was saying, and the protagonist notices that those damned people came much faster than he expected, so he summons the relic there. But then the beautiful woman asks what he plans to do, and then he throws one of those relics, and she doesn't understand any, but the protagonist thinks it's too late, but he thinks he'll just watch them a little, because he has a feeling that they'll keep getting in his way from now on, even complaining about whether he should get rid of them soon. Hold on. Protagonist, hold on. But what is this? You just clashed for the first time, and you already want more than the other? Then he receives a notification, and here it is. The Foundation Dagger, rank C, normal, consumable relic with 54 charges remain. He notices that the charge is already halfway through, and realizes that this is what the crow told him, think carefully. But then, the Japanese man questions why there was no response, since the prophecy surely said that he only needed needed to throw a relic. Then Linda asks about this prophecy, asking if there is a user in Japan who possesses a prophetic relic. He realizes he said too much, but says that it's not important now, and says that someone must have already come there and taken the relic. He asks if this isn't a big problem, because it means more people know about them. Linda says that's true, because there are some marks on the ground and footprints, and someone has definitely been there. Then they look to the side, and the Japanese man complains about what that was, because the sound came from there, and the protagonist holding a rock to attract attention and he notices that the two are too stupid, because he wonders if they can escape a tomb collapsing on top of, and so he orders the relic close the tomb, and the tomb begins to shake, and they all wonder what it is, ordering them to get out quick. They ask where the exit is, and they try to save themselves while the protagonist calmly exits through a sewer. He notices that the tomb's exit was connected to that sewer, and his clothes are a little dirty, but it's barely noticeable. When he returns to his apartment, the tomb has already disappeared, and people are scared at first, but everyone ends up returning to their apartments normal. He goes to his friend Kim Dong, asking why he's standing there, and he tells Jo-hyun that he disappeared, and that giant mound disappeared too. The protagonist simply says that's good, telling them to go inside because he's starving. The boy questions whether he's sure everything is alright. Well, they enter, asking if they won't be buried alive, but he says everything's fine. Then the Japanese man receives a call and questions what the person said, because there was another prophecy, a prophecy that some Korean would get the relic for him. He says they should have told him sooner, asking what he was thinking letting such crucial information slip by. However, the person on the phone says they only found out about it now, and he must also know what kind of user of the future guide relic. So he asks if they couldn't read Kenji, and he says that's exact. However, he starts to get irritated. After all, he had said that he had a student working with, asking why they couldn't read him. The person on the other end of the line says he knows how kids are these days, but says they'll do everything to make sure today's incident doesn't happen again. So he should stay focused, keep working hard. And it's also best to be careful, because the person who stole the relic doesn't seem ordinary, and the prophecy about it's quite disturbing, and the Japanese character gets a little disturbed. The person says he's going to be the one to devour the world, while the protagonist is calmly browsing the news on PC. He mentions that this linguistic ability is incredibly useful, because now he can search for all sorts of information, different language, but nothing seems useful. They're still in a time before the relics are known to the world, and he has to find out what is Okuon his planet. However, he can't find any good information about TKB. Then his friend arrives, asking if he can really understand all. The protagonist says yes, of course, questioning why, asking if he wants him to read it. Dorian says it's fine. However, the protagonist talks to Dorian, asking if he's heard anything about TKBM in the newspapers lately, and Dorian says he doesn't remember anything like. Dorian asks why, and the protagonist says he just wanted some details about the CEO of that company. Dorian finds this strange, questioning why he wants to know, and asks if it's because of work, but says he doesn't know any useful information for him. After all, it's not like the CEO of a large company would go out to meet with an employee of a small company. However, the protagonist says he quit his job, so Dorian doesn't understand anything, questioning why all this, and the protagonist really finds it strange, telling him to wait, because Kyungjo's group had an art gallery, so he's going to use those guys to get some information about his look. On another day at that same agency where the protagonist wrecked everything, Loro says it's a mess, and they took everything that was there, and the other henchman asks what they're going to do now, saying that since the two of them were arrested, they won't be able to continue this business. They're practically unemployed now, and Loro says he already knew that. It's all that bastard Jo-hyun's fault. He can't let this go unpunished, and they have to get revenge on him. And the other of idiot says that, as expected, it's his older brother, saying that they can't forgive him, and the sycophants cling to him, saying that's right, and they have to avenge their older brother and older sister. And he says of course, and he, Song-woo, can't fail to avenge his bosses. But then something happens. They get scared, and someone is calling, and it is John himself called, and they're startled, asking why this bastard is calling. When he answered, the protagonist questions why he took so long to respond, then starts cursing the protagonist, calling him a bastard and ungrateful, asking how he dares send Song-woo and his sister to jail. But the protagonist tells him to shut his mouth, asking if they're still in business. He says he knows they haven't closed down yet, so the blonde guy questions what he wants, saying that because of the two were arrested and all their art pieces were confiscated, and all that's left is to close the business. But the protagonist says that if they haven't closed, it means they're still on TV, which is perfect. He wants them to participate in Midas, and they're surprised to hear the protagonist talk about Midas, the biggest secret auction house in the world, located in Las Vegas, known for having the world's greatest treasure, and he knows John has participated time. He came from an auction and acquired some very powerful relics, and Midas is the best place to get all kinds of relics. If he can get some people doing things for him, then he'll be able to gather some information about that scoundrel. The protagonist says that within this month, they'll find some objects and locate someone for him at Might. The person they're looking for is JK, also known as Jack Cave. The protagonist says that's a pseudonym for Kanta and John, and he uses it frequently. The protagonist says that if they can't find this person, they should tell him, and if they give any wrong information, he'll kill them all. Loro asks if he's joking, asking how the hell they're going to get in there in the first. They only managed to get there because Nona had connections and skill, but the protagonist tells them to figure it out somehow. Unlike them, he knows a few things about business, and since what he's ordering them to do can be considered business, he'll pay them depending on the quality. Based on the information they give him, they question what the protagonist said, stating that no matter how much he pays, he will never obey. Everyone else says he sent for them, asking where the protagonist is now. He replies that if they don't like the offer, that's fine, less expensive, because no matter what, they're going to Midas, since he didn't make that clear the last time he beat. If that's the case, he'll go there and beat them some more until they decide to leave. Then everyone asks the protagonist to wait, but Hien says he'll explain the details better next time, telling them to just wait. As he leaves the house, he says that if the matters with Quanta and John are resolved, he goes hunting for more relics that night. And sometime later, while in a shop, he hears the news reporting that on that day in Times Square in the Yongdongpo district, around 3 a.m., a 40-year-old woman attempted self-immolation by setting herself on fire, and according to witnesses, failed. The protagonist wonders if this incident is a prelude to the appearance of the next tomb, but he also thinks it might be unrelated. Then someone else arrives, shouting at the protagonist, asking if he's finished, questioning how long he intends to stand there, as the corridor is already quite narrow and he can't get through. The protagonist then notices that the Japanese man, questioning why he's there, because that's the damn thing, and he was in the tomb of the golden and silver axes. So he says he already understands if that guy is there, and that means the next tomb should appear nearby, all because that time the Japanese had a user of a prophetic relic. So the protagonist tells him to shut up because he speaks too loudly, asking if he thinks he can't understand, and the Japanese man is surprised that he's speaking his language, so he asks if protagonist is also Japanese, apologizing for his rudeness, and that he had a really complicated day, and the protagonist immediately thinks that this linguistic skill is too useful. So he apologizes to him, asking what he said, because he only knows how to speak Korean, lying to, and at that the Japanese man is surprised, questioning if he was really Korean, asking why the protagonist tricked, and he says that he started it, and the two start to get annoyed, and the Japanese man asking if the protagonist knows who he is, but the protagonist doesn't care, thinking that in any case this damned guy has a relic, and he didn't even try to hide it. Her aura is noticeable, but that's to be expected from an amateur like. He says he doesn't know what kind of relic, but now he wants it. He continues yelling for the protagonist to come back, and grabs the boy's shoulder, saying that if someone is talking, the least he should do is listen to what he has to say. But the protagonist shakes the soda can and throws it in his face, surprising the Japanese boy. He questions why, but Hien apologizes, cynically asking he's okay. He says someone must have shaken the can a little, wondering why they would do that. The Japanese boy gets very angry, but the protagonist gently puts his hand inside his clothes, noticing it's a bracelet relic in a small box. Thinking that if they steal it now, it will be obvious, he tells him to forget about it, saying he doesn't have any money on, and besides, those clothes don't seem very expensive. He tells the Japanese boy that he dropped some and that he should take care of it. Be careful about your identity. Then he grabs it with a lot of swagger, but wonders if the protagonist hasn't discovered his identity, because if they find out that a member of the Japanese excavation is there, things will get very complicated. But he thinks that since the protagonist is just a civilian, it doesn't matter. At least that's what he thinks. But then he feels a tremor, and everyone wonders what it is, and another tomb appears there, and the protagonist sees that he's right all along, because he was definitely expecting this tomb. The Japanese man is happy and speaks loud clearly, and that this is very chaotic, but thinks that this was exactly what would happen according to his prophecy. So he calls someone saying that the tomb has started to appear, and that person says they understand. And there's also one more thing he needs to know, because they just received another prophecy, and it said that the Korean who took the relic of the axes is near him right now. And when the Japanese man discovers, he's shocked, and that person says there's another part of this prophecy that doesn't make any sense, but it says that he needs to be careful with alcohol, and so he immediately remembers the beer ahead, thinking that if that's it, he was the cursed one from that other prophet. Then, when he discovers that the prophecy involving alcohol was about the protagonist, he starts running away, saying that he'll have to find him first, just telling him more about the prophecy, while the protagonist, he's in another corner, questioning why. And Soria is so bloodthirsty, completely different from the other two, and it seems like it's going to be a really evil relic this time. But then the Japanese guy catches up to the protagonist and yells at. The protagonist looks back calmly, and the Japanese guy tells him not to move, ordering him to stay where he is, or he'll shoot, pointing a gun at the protagonist. The protagonist is surprised to see that guy again, so he tells the protagonist to open his back now, asking if he's going to keep ignoring. But then the place starts shaking, and the protagonist receives some notification. Then a warning is given, saying that he detected an an intense aura coming towards him. Then everything starts to open up on the ground with an absurd flash, and a huge flashbang opens the city from under the protagonist. Everything becomes chaos with several blades coming out of the ground, and everyone wonders what it was. The protagonist even hits his head and notices that a lot of civilians were caught up in this mess, and the relic definitely involved all these people hurt, and that's a tomb full of weapons. The swords are broken, and he's been to this place in a past life. This is the tomb of the Japanese relic, the Muramasa katana. He explains that Muramasa was a famous Japanese swordsmith during the Muromachi period, and he founded the Muramasa school. The katanas made by the Muramasa school were extremely famous and considered perfect. However, during this period, they had an incident with Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, and his grandfather, father, and brother were killed by katanas made by Muramasa. Because of this incident, Tokugawa ordered all Muramasa swords destroyed, and rumors began to spread that Muramasa swords were cursed. He says that this is the kind of relic he will have to deal with, stating that this relic certainly has immense hate for humans. The bloodthirsty aura of the relic begins to affect his body, damaging his skin, and he needs protection body. The protagonist senses that. The protagonist notices the laceration on his skin and realizes it's already started, noticing he needs to close the wound quickly. But then the Japanese guy comes back and pesters, saying he told him not to move, ordering him to open his back, empty his pockets too. The protagonist realizes the guy is too persistent, saying it's practically robbery, asking why he should obey him. Then the Japanese guy asks if he has any last wishes, saying he'd better stop playing around if he doesn't want to get shot. The protagonist tells him to shoot already, and the Japanese guy is surprised. The protagonist says he'd recommend he not do that because it won't work. The Japanese guy then asks if he thinks he's joking, saying he'll regret it. The protagonist is asked if he really has to mess with his leg to understand the situation he's in, and the Japanese man says it's fine, he'll do as he pleases. But when he pulls the trigger, his gun explodes in his hand, and he starts screaming in pain. The protagonist claims he warned him, explaining that when you're in a tomb, modern weapons don't work, and relics don't want to make things easy for humans inside the tomb. The Japanese man then asks how he knows all that, thinking that the person who took the gold and silver axes must be. The protagonist confirms this, grabbing him by the collar and saying that the relic is his now, so he should stop whining. Then the Japanese man asks what he is doing, asking. The protagonist releases him, but the protagonist says he's in his way, telling him to get lost, throwing him far away, throwing him into the middle of those mud zombies, and he starts screaming in fear, asking what the hell is, and the protagonist tells him to just stand there, because just so you know, this trap is going to be kind of annoying. Then the protagonist leaves, leaving him behind all angry, while the monsters cling to him. And he says he's going to kill the boy, but then he talks to the other people, saying that everything is under control, so they don't need to worry about anything, saying that one of them there must be able to speak Japanese. And so one of them says he knows a little. Then the Japanese man asks what he thinks about helping, but another of those people who were there asks them to wait, because that guy has a weapon, asking what if he's dangerous, and the person who wants to help says that doesn't mean they can abandon him, and the Japanese man continues asking for help, telling them to believe him, because he's from the Japanese excavation. He even received training to properly handle the situation. He promises to get them all out of their safe. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues on his way, saying they'll see the relic that guy had. As he throws him to the ground, he also looks in his pockets, surprised that he was trying to start a fight without knowing anything about the tomb. He notices it's a rope bracelet and a small box with a rice ball. He realizes this relic is from a Korean legend, the brothers who became the sun and the moon. He explains that a tiger killed their mother to get more rice ball and then tried to kill the brother, but they were saved by a rope that descended from the heaven. He says the relic isn't the highest rank, but it's still useful. He'll put them there for now, and thus he receives the title of Poor Thief, unlocking a new skill, the basic tomb raiding skill, Agile Feint rank. He's surprised he gained the skill, because that means he now has the 4 basic skill, and those nimble fingers mean that just by touching an item, he's able to figure out how to use it correctly. When used on consumable relic, the consumption rate is lower, and his ability to repair relics increases slightly. He also has a higher chance of stealing relics from other people, so he's surprised to have all this, looking at all those stats. He also notices that he has a reward, because that damned crow, he thinks it's treating him like a game character, but he thinks it doesn't matter, telling it to keep playing with him anyway, because he'll still get that reward, so there's not much to complain about. But then he hears a scream, a cry for help from afar, and he complains about what's happening, noticing it's coming from below. When he looks down, he sees several people there and realizes it's a trap. Down below, everyone is begging someone to stop, asking the girl to calm down, but he begins to realize he isn't listening. The protagonist notices he's been possessed, and anyone who touches that knife will also be possessed. The more people possessed by the knife, the harder it will be for those not possessed to escape, because in the end, everyone died. That's the truth behind the trap, and the more people die down there, but the bridge will grow, and it's a trap of sacrifice. And then he asks who ordered them to go down there, questioning if it was that Japanese guy 4, and they say it was him, and he sang some strange song, and the trap disappeared, saying that after they got him out of it, that's what happened, and he said that they all needed to die so they wouldn't reveal some kind of secret, and the protagonist gets angry with that crazy guy, saying that's probably what the user of prophetic relic ordered him to do, and the protagonist goes down there, and they tell him to be careful because there are a lot of swords on the wall, but the protagonist manages to cut them all using his dagger, and the girl turns to him at that moment, and they notice that she's going after him, and the protagonist says that he's going to use that relic, ordering the rope to go up and bind the girl, and the rope really wraps around her cleat, and the girl falls to the ground stiff, unable to do anything, and the protagonist thinks that this was very convenient, telling her to stay quiet because he's going to keep it. Then the knife asks who it is. He, however, thinks that this doesn't matter, now ordering him to kill and murder all humans, but the protagonist questions with a little relic like daring to tell him what she did, and the relic is shocked, and then the protagonist notices that it's a rank C relic, saying that it's not even good enough, asking what all this ego is about, saying that it's a useless relic, asking where the chief relic of that tomb is, throwing it aside, and the girl asks him to untie her, and then that rope starts calling the girl to play, inviting her to have fun in a rather strange tone, and the protagonist sees that that relic is the wretched mania, saying that again, the relics do what they want when you leave them alone, ordering her to return to him, and asks everyone there to follow him because he will get them out of there, saying that they don't need to doubt him because he's not a bad person, and with that, he actually manages to get her out. Meanwhile, the Japanese man keeps shouting that he's a genius because he got rid of all those useless and found the Muramasa relic hall, and now he just needs to recover the sword and get rid of that annoying Korean guy, saying that the bastard stole his relic too. The Korean guy says he'll make him suffer, but after picking up several swords, he notices they're all fake. He asks where the Muramasa is, but then everyone arrive, finding the Japanese man, asking how he dared try to kill them. They challenge him to a fight, and the Japanese man asks how they got out of it, but nobody cares and starts beating him up, throwing him to the ground, shoving him away, and stomping on. The protagonist says he's really ridiculous, and the Japanese man realizes it must have been his fault. The protagonist says of course it was, after all, whose fault would it be? He says he can't believe he couldn't even find the relic, even though he got there first, saying he must be really stupid, and then he asks his golden axe to locate the relic. The sword then reveals itself amidst all the other, noticing that the relic was right underneath his own, and the Japanese man can hardly believe that such a powerful sword is the Muramasa. When the protagonist pulls it out, he says that's because it only reveals its true form when activated, and then it says that they are trying to control him again, calling the protagonist a foolish human, and stating that his body weak and broke, and if he wishes to use his power the relic, being told to offer 10 sacrifices, needs human blood to restore its body. If it cannot provide this, it will be buried there with the rest of. The Japanese man is surprised that someone is speaking to the protagonist, and everyone listening to the relic speak is surprised, meaning that 10 of them have to die there. They ask if the relic is serious, but the protagonist notices that weapon relics are always like this, asking if this is its test. The relic confirms that it is, asking what he is waiting for, ordering the boy to assassinate 10 humans in its name. The protagonist refuses and begins to grab the relic with all his might, making it scream. He questions why he should do this when he can simply dominate, and the relic says that it hurts while the protagonist is doing it. The protagonist says that it is not him who will be tested, but the relic, and if it does not submit to him, then he will. The protagonist breaks her into tiny pieces, and the entire tomb begins to tremble. The protagonist orders Muramasa to obey him immediately, but she continues to refuse, questioning how a mere human dares do this to her. Then, after a huge whirlwind, the protagonist finally manages to control her, and thus, the tomb is finished. He asks everyone to climb the rope, saying that they will get out safely if they do, and that everyone will thank. However, the protagonist tells the Japanese man not to even try to blend into the crowd, noticing that he is planning to get rid of those people. But he says no, saying he's not thinking about that, promising the protagonist, and asking him only to let him leave. He says that if he lets him leave, he will recommend him to his country, and he can work for them. He can earn 10 billion bounty. He works for a Japanese excavation, and they also have the prophetic relic guide to the future, and he can even use this relic, which will make things easier. Jorian, who is very much involved in his life, asks the protagonist what he thinks, and Jorian says that he is quite funny, because as far as he knows, the guide to the future can only be used by its original owner, so how will he use it? Then, the Japanese man says that there is a group that helps them use this relic, and they will make sure to help him as much as possible, and the protagonist says that this sounds interesting, saying that he can use the rope too, but he will be the last to leave, and so the Japanese man thinks that he managed to get away with, as expected of a loser like, and he let himself be influenced impressed by the 10 billion yen. And then he apologizes for what he did for, because it seems that he has some understanding of things, and a skilled user like him would be welcome in any group. And the protagonist says that they will talk more about that agreement. The protagonist says he wants to know more about the Japanese group working with the pathetic Relic, because if they're unreliable, he won't want to work. The Japanese man replies that he doesn't need to worry about that, as it's the famous TKBM. The protagonist, surprised, smiles and asks if it's true, then stomps on the Japanese man's chest, throwing him to the ground. He breaks one of his legs when he falls, and the protagonist thanks him for the information, saying he thought the Japanese man was desperate to live enough to give him such vital information. Then he asks who the hell would want to work for trash. The Japanese man tells him to wait, asking if he's really going to kill someone in cold blood, and orders the protagonist to come back. And they find the whole place crumbling down on their heads. Okay, we've already seen that the protagonist will kill when he has to kill. That's a good sign. He won't be one of those spineless guys who does nothing when needed. So after that, the protagonist leaves the tomb and goes to a bathroom. And while he's there, he keeps hearing the voice of that Relic talk and starts to get annoyed, telling them to shut the hell up, asking who started. Then he asks if it was Muramasa who started that fight 3-2. Then Muramasa tells him to let go, and the protagonist tells him to shut up, throwing him into the toilet and telling him to enjoy the toilet water. Then Muramasa starts cursing him, and the protagonist notices that all this is because of that bastard. He has a huge wound on his arm, and these are the consequences of forcing bending. He says that to get any relic, the normal process would be to pass the tests given by them, but by ignoring this process, he suffered some damage from trying to force bending on these relics. And the stronger the relic is, the more it will resist, and if he continues using this method on his body, he won't last much longer. He thinks he really has no other choice, because if he doesn't master these relics, one day they will all betray him. But then, he receives a notification from the Raven, saying that he left the tomb and unlocked the basic skills of Tomb Raid, and now he will receive the reward for completing that quest. The reward is the choice of paths he will follow, the path of domination or the path of socialization. He is surprised that she is telling him choose which one he will use more, asking why she is making him choose this, since Joanna wasn't born in some kind of test. And just because his arm is like this doesn't mean he's going to stop what he's doing. He will choose the path of domination, and with that, he receives the quest reward. But he questions why he didn't get anything, wondering if he shouldn't receive some kind of reward box, because if he's going to imitate a game like this, then he should do it right. But he notices that he received a silver pill, realizing it's a relic in the form of a pill, especially because those status windows, when it appears, he thinks it's some kind of consumable, so he wonders if he should swallow it, thinking that he doesn't have much to lose anyway, because if he dies after eating it, then he thinks that's his fate, and when he throws it down, he calls Muramasa again, saying that everything is alright, saying that they're going home, saying that he's all disgusted. He regretted throwing it into that vase, especially when he'll have to retrieve it again. It's not a very intelligent action. He notices noticing that the pill is already taking effect, throwing Muramasa to the ground. Then he realizes that the wounds on his arm are healing, noticing that it's a healing relic, and realizing this is a theft, since healing relics are extremely rare and valuable. Then the system sends him another message, saying that he withstood the poisonous effects of the relic and successfully recovered, and that he discovered the tolerance and immunity ability. He notes that it's the first time he's seen such an ability, but then he thinks that perhaps it's a unique ability created just. Then the newspaper reports that a major earthquake struck the Su district in Yongdong. It happened, and an unidentified structure appeared at the site of the land that a motorcycle was found, and inside this mysterious structure, about 50 people were trapped. These people said that inside the place there were several dangerous traps, including a wall full of swords. One witness also said that someone was trying to harm them. The Korean government contacted the Japanese government and is awaiting a response. On the other hand, this situation led the Chinese and Russian governments to demand explanation from the Japanese government, as well as that they assume responsibility for their act. But then the people watching the news report turned off the TV and questioned the leader of the Japanese excavation group about what they had done, since the media was now talking about the tombs and relics. Not only that, but they had also caused great shame to their country, saying that their subordinate had caused a gigantic scandal and then died, saying that death is not enough for someone like him. Then the leader of the excavation group apologized, saying that only an unexpected event had occurred, because the Korean of the prophecy appeared, and that was Mori Hiroyuki, leader of the Japanese. During the excavation, one of them asks if he hadn't said he would take care of the Korean man from the prophecies. He explains that they tried, but there were many obstacles along the way. He adds that this time it's different, saying he could use the guide to the future to locate his whereabouts. However, he asks if he hadn't said that the user of the relic of the future must first make physical contact before locating some. He says they can do that now because Abe was marked by the relic of the guide to the future, and since he made contact with that Korean man, even if it's still incomplete, they can now locate. The students who aren't users of the guide to the future are looking for ways to use this relic without being the original owner, and the TKBM group is also investing a lot of time and money to complete this research. They then say they will give him another chance, and the man thanks them profusely, promising they will do their best to eliminate that Korean man. Then the protagonist realizes he received a tolerance, wondering if this tolerance refers to poison. Regarding the relics, this will be incredible, as all relic users suffer from them, and in their past life, they entered an era where healing relics were the highest priority. If this tolerance ability is for the poison of the relics, then it's definitely a unique ability. He notes that this is all because of that Raven relic, asking what he's planning, questioning if he'll benefit from giving him such an advantage, asking him to answer, saying he's good at talk, telling him to use those bright status windows to talk, but he receives no response, and he notices that he's being quiet until he receives a call from Cian Bilbo, who's judging how his subordinate is doing, and he even gets annoyed with Jito for being summoned, but lets it go, saying that he looked at the list of participants in that auction, and the protagonist questions what he included, and he says that there are 3 people with the name Jake, so he says that he'll have to look for himself, find out who they are. Then Cian Bilbo is surprised that he goes there, but the system says that he has been marked by an S-rank relic, and his future is being read now, and the protagonist is quite surprised that it's the guide of the future who is reading his future, and thinks that this is irritating him a little, until Cian Bilbo speaks with Jorian, but he says that he is Inni, he'll tell you where they are, but only in a while, because he has to go somewhere first to do something. The protagonist talks about Prince Shitoku's Guide to the Future, and the prince was a politician and ruler during the Azuka period. The Guide to the Future was a prophecy sutra written by, even though there's no evidence that this object actually existed. Ancient books briefly mention this legendary item, but it seems this relic was one of the first to enter human society, and instead of creating a tomb, the relic chose its own owner. It fell in front of a girl, and she's surprised by it, asking what it is, because it looks kind of sojo. Put that thing down, because soon a Shinigami about 2 meters tall will appear on your neck, and don't mess with those books out of nowhere. Then he says that Sasaki Yuka was the person chosen by the relic of the Guide to the Future to be its owner, and since then the Guide to the Future will always be. Follow her wherever she goes, and even after crushing, burning, and abandoning the Guide to the Future, it will always reappear in front of her, which greatly frightened Sasaki. However, the Japanese government soon discovered Sasaki's Guide to the Future and asked her to use it to help the Japanese excavation. Because of this, her family ceased to have financial problems and began to live with many benefits. With the help of the Guide to the Future, the Japanese excavation group managed to collect several relics, and it seemed that everything was going well for Sasaki. But it didn't last long because she dropped out of school to dedicate herself completely reading the guide to. She couldn't understand the true meaning of the difficult kanji when they appeared and couldn't properly use the power of the guide future. Over time, another user of a prophetic relic appeared and surpassed her ability, which eventually caused his death. Then he says that he was planning to leave her in peace, since he was going to die anyway. He's really going to disappear, but since he had the courage to try and find out where he is, everything changed. Besides, since they're also involved with that wretched Sayaku Oran, he can't leave them alone and will have to thwart his plans as much as possible. Meanwhile, they're talking to Sasaki trying to get her attention, but the girl isn't paying any attention, watching her idol show and saying that Sasuke is not only handsome, but also a good singer. Then her father arrived, saying it's time to read her future guide, but she questions whether she's already at the good part. Her father says it's the 4th time she's seen that show, but she questions it, saying she really likes it if it's the 4th time. He apologized, but then a woman greets Sasaki, and the girl goes to sit at her table, and she says that she always has to read and interpret these complicated messages, and so he says that if there's any kanji she doesn't understand, she should write it down as best as possible and give it, and the girl agreed, but then she screams and everyone asks what happened, and the girl despairs because the book is saying that she's going to die. The writing is obvious this time, and it's saying that she's going to be killed, and she doesn't understand, questioning what's happening, saying it's because of that Korean guy, saying that Abyssal died because of him too. Her mother asks her to calm down, asking if she can see if there are any other prophecies besides this one, saying that the girl has the power to see the future, asking her to compose herself and look again, and if her father says that's really it, because if that guy comes to kill her then there will be more prophecies about. Then she becomes convinced that she really can see the future, and says that they are right, saying that she can't lose to him. Meanwhile, at Haneda Airport, the protagonist is disembarking them, but all the Japanese authorities know this, saying that the person they are looking for, the Korean relic user, has arrived, proposing to approach him at the airport, but they refuse, saying that they will continue to observe him through the future guide, because they thought the future guide wouldn't be able to locate him properly. But then they say that everything is fine, because the future guide only needs to continue observing his presence, and one of their soldiers says that with this opportunity, they will solve this problem once and for all. They will make their first Manhwa. The protagonist goes to eat some sushi in peace, and says that, as he had thought, sushi made by an authentic sushi chef is delicious. However, he wonders when those bastards will come to attack since he's been threatening her all the time, and with that, they'll surely appear. He says that the guide from the future must have told Sasaki Yuka about the curse he's writing for, and that must have caught the attention of that relic. Since the guide's mark wasn't complete, he made sure to walk slowly as well, because the Japanese soldiers must already. Then one of them is actually looking out the window, telling the other to quiet. The chef apologizes to and asks Sasaki ready, and she says no, asking him to wait a little, asking if that's really logical. She says that the guy is trying to kill her, so why would she have to go in? But then the chef says that she only needs to make eye contact, because that way her marking will be complete. Then they'll know everything about him too. That damn guy doesn't even know what she looks like, and so everything's fine, and she thinks it's true. And the guy says that if things get difficult, they'll make sure to bring her back, telling the girl to go in there. And she ends up agreeing to, saying that she'll have to go in soon, because these gentlemen told her that the ability to predict anything is the strongest ability that exists, which means she has the advantage. He doesn't know what she looks like either, and so when she entered, the protagonist just gives a little smile, and she's surprised, noticing that he's very handsome, saying that he's even more handsome than So-So, and questioning if those guys are trying to kill someone like, saying that this is a wait. The protagonist simply thanks her, clearly realizing that she is the user of the relic from the future, thinking how impressive that she came to meet him in person, ready to draw his katana. While he is trying to grab the katana, everyone is watching this through the recording, noticing that he is trying to draw a weapon, ordering them to go inside, because Sasaki-chan is in danger, and questioning what she is doing, why she didn't leave as soon as they made eye contact, asking what she is thinking. But before they go inside, the girl leaves, so the protagonist is surprised that she got up out of nowhere, and then she asks the protagonist if she can be his fan. Then Jorian doesn't understand any, and the girl the protagonist realizes he must be a celebrity, and he questions why she closed the door. They notice she's talking, and perhaps she's trying to get information. They question how she's doing that, asking if they're sure about. The protagonist questions what the girl said, and she says she just wants to talk to him for a bit, saying maybe she doesn't understand, asking for a sec. Then she picks up the phone, saying she's fallen in love with him, and sees the future, asking if he has a girlfriend. The protagonist asks what the hell she's talking about, thinking for a moment, starting to think he knows what she's trying to say, but asks what's wrong with the girl, because in a situation like this, how could she be like, but he thinks it doesn't matter, because this is a good opportunity, and shows him the girl, who is all happy. Then the guys outside ask if they can hear anything, but something comes out from inside, breaking everything, and it's the protagonist's rope. They question what the hell that was, because the table was thrown, and they start to notice there's a rope around, and the rope ties them all up, and the protagonist comes out with the girl, and he says he knew they would try something like that, so he prepared his rope beforehand, and tells the girl not to worry about, because he only tied them up so they wouldn't bother. And anyway, they go to their meeting, and the girl actually follows, being good-looking opens door. Being good-looking opens door, and moments before, while the girl was sitting next to him, and now the little protagonist, he texted her on his cell phone, asking if she wants to go on the date with, and the girl is surprised that he knows Japanese, and he says he knows a little, asking if she didn't come there alone, saying that she probably came there with a Japanese army, and she says that's right, and he says that they don't like it, so they probably won't let her go with, saying that they're a pain, and then he says that it wouldn't surprise him if they made him do boring things every day too, and the girl he says that's exactly right. Then he agrees, saying they'll escape together and leave them behind, asking him to keep a close eye on. Then, when he strokes the girl's head, she's even more surprised, and all her life's been in love, thinking he's not a scary person after all. Meanwhile, as the protagonist leaves, he leaves everyone else trapped and drags the girl along. She questions if he's really the one trying to kill her. She'd be easily kidnapped, wouldn't she? And as she goes with him, she thinks that since she made eye contact, she can read his future whenever she wants, so she still has the advantage. He then thinks they must be far away already, but she keeps thinking that she left her future guide at home, saying that she doesn't really care since it's him. But the protagonist puts the katana to the girl's neck, telling her not to make any noise and to give him her cell phone, saying that she is a good girl. Then he completely breaks the cell phone. She asks what he is doing, and he tells her to be quiet, saying that he is just getting rid of the things they will use to track, saying that it would be a lifesaver if the Japanese Defense Force came to bother them, asking if she already knows who really is, saying that she is the user of the future god, and so she questions what he is doing, since he already knows who. And in fact, he's more frightening than she thought, and in that, she actually goes to a restaurant, and when they get there, he simply orders something for her to drink, and when the door closes, she looks like a dog that fell off a moving truck, trying to beg the guy to save her. But then the protagonist is tying her hand, and she says he's going too far, calling him a disgusting liar, saying she doesn't believe he faked a date. But he asks what she's talking about since then, spending time together in that couple's room at the coffee shop, and if that's not a date, then what is? Then the girl asks what he's going to do to her, asking if he's really going to kill her, just like the prophecy said, but he says says he was planning to kill her beforehand, and if she came any closer, he was thinking of cutting her throat with the muramasa. But since she's even more of an idiot than he thought, here they are. He tells her to get her guide to the future, instructing her to write down everything she sees there. And so she says she left her guide to the future at home. But he asks if she thinks he doesn't know when that tattoo appeared, after he started using the guide to the future, instructing her to touch her tattoo and summon the guide to the future because she'll be able to summon him, saying he doesn't believe she doesn't know anything so basic. Then she summons the guide to the future and is surprised that he actually appeared, and the protagonist says it's good that she writes as much can, because if she forgets a single line, he'll kill her, saying that the girl can start. And the girl becomes tense while writing and when she finishes it, the protagonist just watches her, and he tells her not to even think about resting, asking why she's slowing down. And she says it's because her hand hurt. He asks how much more he needs, and he says it will be as much as possible. She then says she'll give him the guide to the future, asking her to let him go, but he refuses what she's trying to do, telling her to continue writing. He thinks that if he wanted the guide to the future, he would have already stolen it, but he didn't take it because the guide to the future is an S-rank relic, and that rank is considerably high on the list of relics, as there are ranks D, C, B, A, S, SS, and I think even ranks above. So he says that if he tried to force domination on a high-level relic, the penalty he would suffer would be too great, and even trying to dominate Muramasa, a relic of a rank below the guide to the future, caused large marks on his body. And if he tried to dominate the guide to the future now, his arm wouldn't be the only part that would suffer damage. And not only that, that's right, he doesn't have any healing relics. And so, while he's watching, some government officials come in, but the owner of the place tells them to stop because the customers were uncomfortable. But the men say they finished up very quick, that he tells her to go back to see if there's another way out, and tells her to make sure she checks every room. The protagonist notices they've finally arrived and asks the girl how much she's written. She says she's almost finished with the first note, and he says that's enough. She asks if that means he'll let her go now, but he says there's something else. He puts the notebook in front of her, startling. She begs him not to do that, saying she'll write more of the prophecy for him, and asks if it wouldn't be better he didn't kill her too. But he asks if she thinks she's worth that, telling her to forget it, saying he thought that she's misunderstanding something, saying she thought she was the one using the relic, but unfortunately, she's the one being used there, and that's probably her only way to survive. So when he raises the sword, the girl starts trembling, and the protagonist strikes the relic with his sword. Then she asks what he's doing, and starts trembling again, and then the girl faints. The protagonist then receives the title of Destroyer of Diabolical Relics, and he unlocked a title, thus having an increase in his domination and a decrease in his socialization, and his ability to detect relics increases, and his ability to spy also increases to rank. Because he destroyed a higher rank relic, he became aware of the giant hunter, and the protagonist questions why so many windows. But while he's engrossed, the army arrives, saying that's where he was asking what happened and what happened to the guide of future, and the protagonist asks why they are so surprised since he was only destroyed, and so they get angry with the leader of those soldiers ordering the protagonist killed. Meanwhile, while those Japanese are ordering him killed, the protagonist is surprised, saying it's a joke, telling them to go ahead, telling them to try if they think they have the skills. Then the Japanese question what he's talking, and the protagonist tells them to keep it, throwing something into the air, surprising everyone. It's a delicious homemade mod. He says it belonged to Abby, and he's going to return it to. Then he says he heard it tastes like murder, disappearing from. Then the Japanese pick it up, noticing that the damned thing is gone, and he questions what he planning. But then when he looks at the mochi, he wonders what that smell is. Then one of them starts trying to grab the mochi, and the other also tries to steal it from his hand. But he tells those damn things to stop, saying that the mochi is his, asking where his manners are, and says that there's a weapon too, so it becomes chaos. And meanwhile, the protagonist is already on the plane, making off, and he says there's no better escape relic than delicious homemade mochi because it confuses enemy and even allows the user to teleport instant. Anyway, he wants to see what the future guide said, and it says that the group supporting the future guide's relic in Japan was TKB. Because of this, there's a possibility that Sasaki made contact with Shuko, so it's possible that the future guide's prophecy might have something to do with Sai. When he sees it, he's surprised because he found what he was looking for, and he says that in a month he must go to the underworld of the place consumed by greed, and in that place, the omen concerning the world's greatest calamity will begin. Then he thinks of this underworld consumed by greed, saying he's certain it refers to the Mito's auction house, the place where Seong Woo and the others gathered information about the Shuko. And since he said there were 3 people with the initials JK, it has to be one of those 3, and the prophecy seems to indicate that as well. But the last part, the omen concerning the world's greatest calamity, must be about the Great Catastrophe, and he speaks of this Great Catastrophe, which is an event showing the immense influence of the relics on the world. And after that event, everyone became aware of the tomb, and the discovery of relics increased dramatically. But from what as far as he remembered, the great catastrophe didn't happen so soon. Furthermore, the next lines say that the god who understands his greed will ask for his cooperation, and he notices that this line might be saying that a divine rank relic here in the hearing. So Seong Woo managed to get this relic to become that powerful figure he once was, thinking that if that's the case, he'll definitely steal it from him. Then, in the meeting room of the Japanese excavation research, they say that even though Sasaki regained consciousness, she's still feeling weak, and about the future guy, it seems to be completely destroyed. They say that while all this was happening, Captain Mori and his men were shooting at each other and ended up getting hurt and incapacitated. That military man says that's exact. Then, that man asks if this makes any sense, asking if he thinks this situation is a joke. Then they ask the president to calm down, but he questions how he can calm down in such a situation. And then a woman inside said, the text states that it has been confirmed that the future guide was destroyed, and the Japanese Defense Force also suffered damage. The person on the other end of the line is saddened, but asks if she is saying that a single person caused all that. She confirms that this is the case, and he questions who the culprit was, asking what they will do now. The woman questions whether they should seek revenge for their losses, but Kwon says they don't need to. However, she asks about the amount they invested in the future guide research project, which was all wasted. Kwon confirms that, but she should think about, because if this person manages to destroy the future guide, it means they have a considerable amount of power. He asks if it wouldn't be better if they could recruit this type of person into their group, but she mentions that this person destroyed an extremely valuable prophetic relic without hesitation. She asks what they will do if this person does the same to their company's relics, and what they will do if this person damages the president's relic. The man says that this won't be a problem if they promise this person a large sum of money, saying that there's nothing money can't solve, and all they need to do is keep their eyes open. Meanwhile, back in Las Vegas, the protagonist is calmly drinking orange and asks why they're so late. Seon-gil finally arrives, talks to Jo-hein, but the protagonist says they're half an hour late. The boy explains that it's because that crazy guy wouldn't let them in, and that the man says it's the Mito's auction house, and only auction participants can enter. If they're not participants, they have to leave. Seon-gil asks if he sees that, saying that this bastard keeps doing this, and the security guard says that if they continue acting this way, they'll use force to remove. The boy questions what the hell he's talking about, telling him to speak in Korean, but the protagonist says he's acting all-powerful and strong, saying he's in the United States, and still telling him to speak in Korean. The boy is embarrassed, and the protagonist says that those three are his guests, and he's responsible. At that point, the security guard, he apologizes, saying that it seems he made a big mistake, but the protagonist says it's okay, saying it's understandable considering their lack of style. And then Woo is surprised that he knows how to speak English, but the protagonist says that it doesn't matter, telling them to sit down, tell him what they've discovered. He then says that these are the documents belonging to the three people with the initials Jake, and the protagonist notes that it seems they really did their research. It appears that in the end, these three are actually other. He asks if he managed to find the person he was looking for, and the protagonist says that he did, because this person is certainly the false identity of Siaka Wong. He says that if that damned person is there, it means there's an extremely valuable relic in that auction, and he'll look into it for him. It's actually possible that a divine rank relic could appear there, but then he asks why he's looking at the auction catalog, since only multi-billionaires come there, and if he tries to make a good offer, he'll end up having to sell his body pay. But then the protagonist notices that he doesn't see any divine rank relic, questioning what the prophecy was saying. Then he notices Hammurabi's code, and also Shakespeare's pen, and there are a few other items he wants. But then the boy doesn't understand anything, becoming surprised and asking if the protagonist is going to participate in the auction, and he says that's exactly, but he questions if he's joking, since they're talking about the Mito's auction, because the initial bids are usually from 10 billion to 20 billion won, and they only came there to make some contact, and they never planned to buy anything. But the protagonist questions if he's saying he doesn't have money to buy. Then he leaves, leaving everyone behind, and the protagonist questions if he forgot that this is the city of gamble, saying that you can do anything with money. Then he doesn't understand anything, asking if he's thinking of making money by gamble, noticing that that damned guy is really crazy, and while watching the protagonist gamble, the people around wonder how long those numbers will continue to rise, since he still has more than 10 rounds, and it could increase even more, and the one can hardly believe it, swearing he's a slot machines. Can they really give that much money? And the other one says that if you don't want to withdraw the money right away, you can accumulate what it seems like. But he says that what makes it even more insane is that he managed to win millions of dollars, and from all the slot machines he went to, asking how he manages to do that. And the protagonist picks up a millionaire Walt, and he says he's going somewhere else, telling them to stop staring, follow him, because he's going to exchange it for money, and then they question how much that is, telling Jorian that he even scored too many points, asking what if they end up being killed. And then someone goes up to the protagonist, telling him to stop right. The man asks if everything is alright, and if they search him, saying they've never had anyone who hit so many jacks. The protagonist replies that everything is fine, saying he won't find anything anyway. The man realizes he's right, but asks what's in the protagonist's. The protagonist says it's just a souvenir he bought, and that it has a beautiful golden. The man then realizes it's just an ordinary souvenir, but the protagonist says that's what it looks like. In reality, the knife is the golden axe relic in disguise, and the axe is furious, asking why he has to stay in that shameful form for how long. The protagonist explains that shaping the relic is one of the most important skills for a user, because the golden axe has the ability to detecting valuable items and money. He can tell in advance which machines will give him a jack, and he can also tell which casinos will give him a large. It's a very valuable relic, and so the man apologizes, as he seems extremely lucky. The henchmen notice that he didn't cheat, realizing this is crazy, and ask what the protagonist's secret is. The employees then start checking the slot machines as well, but they've never seen anything like happen. The protagonist says that this just means they have to go to another casino now, telling them to stop being impressed by everything. Then Xiongyu calls the protagonist over, asking him to tell her his secret. The protagonist goes to Gixinya to transfer all the money he wants, and she's surprised by the amount. She says they'll have to escort him to his VIP area, asking him to stop. The protagonist says no, just give her the money. Everyone is surprised, as they've never seen so much money. So, Xiongyu asks if this isn't enough for them to live comfortably for the rest of their lives, saying they're millionaires. But the protagonist notices that they seem to be misunderstanding, and that this money isn't for them. They think, of course not, but still, all this money is ridiculous. Then he talks to Zhou Hian, asking if he really has to participate in the auction, questioning if it wouldn't be better to just take all that money and go home. The protagonist says no, but that all that money is enough to buy anything he wants for the rest of his life. They ask why, and the protagonist says it's because his goal is to get the relic from the auction, and also if he wants to compete against Quan, he'll need a little more money. He tells them to finish eating quick because he has to go for another round at the casino, and they're surprised that the protagonist is going to do this again. Then Machado says he smells money, asking the protagonist when he's going to transform him back into his original form, but thinks not. It matters, because he will only enjoy the smell of desperation in the casinos over their losses a little longer, and the protagonist tells him to stop with that bipolarity, telling him to hurry up and find the next jackpot, and he says that everything is fine, and then a status window appears for the protagonist, and he enters a place that the relic appreciates considerably, and this socialization with the relics increases, and the ability to spy also levels up. He thinks that even though casinos are good places to get money, there's a problem, and like battlefield, casinos are places where humans feel despair and suffer. He says that places where people suffer are sacred to the relics. He doesn't like doing things that please those wretched relics, and he thinks he has to get the money quick and get out of it. But then someone calls Joyo asking him wait, asking what's in his back and why it's like that. So when he opens the backpack, the protagonist gets a shock because the silver axe is there, and he says that while the gold axe has the ability to find wealth, the silver axe has the ability to find and mark enemies who are a threat to his master, asking why that damn thing is react. And then everyone inside starts screaming, with two people almost stopping fighting, one calling the other a cheat, and so they ask them to stop, saying it's dangerous to break the machine. Then Songwoo questions what's happening, but doesn't look back. He doesn't see a guy almost aiming at his head, and that guy walks right past him towards the protagonist. Manda, I'm going to give him his money. But when the protagonist looks to the side, he manages to throw that guy to the ground, and he thinks that by throwing him by his clothes, he's the croupier of this casino, asking if he's crazy, questioning what he's thinking, attacking a customer like that. And since he knows there shouldn't be any tomb appearing around them, he questions why this is happening. But when he looks back, he sees a woman approaching, a blonde, beautiful woman, attracting attention, and everyone looks at her, and the protagonist is startled to see her, telling her to grab her things quick because they are leaving. Then Songwoo asks why, and the protagonist says that he never thought he would find that woman, thinking that of course everything will be a mess, and they have to avoid that woman because she is Irene Hilton, the youngest daughter of the wealthy Hilton family. But that's not all about her, and the divine rank relics are the strongest of all, and the users who possess these relics can rise above of all the other, and because of this, these users obtain the titles of gods, and there were titles like God of Destiny, God of Conquest, God of Wealth. These users possessed absolute authority in the Age of Relics, and among these people, Irene Hilton was the user of a very frightening relic, and her title was Goddess of Failure. Anything near her received extreme bad. She says that some people lost all their money and went bankrupt, other companies closed their businesses, and she also caused a global financial crisis. That's why it's best to avoid her at all costs. But the protagonist, while trying to escape, ends up having the girl clinging to his neck, and she starts calling him, asking him to wait, running out. But the protagonist pretends not to be a rabbit and leave, and the girl asks him to wait. But as soon as he tries to leave, he touches the door, and the system reacts by throwing several notifications in his his face, and he detects a threatening aura coming from the door, and that the relics in his possession will suffer critical damage, and he receives a warning stating that the permitted amount of use of his relic will be consumed on a larger scale. He realizes things are really going wrong, and when Irene gets even closer, she asks him to listen to what she has to say, touching the protagonist and contaminating with this ingrained bad. Jorian begins to notice that he is cornered by the girl, and she asks him to listen to what she has to say while touching it. He receives the influence of the relic, and the system says that he is being trapped by a harmful aura. Due to the aura, his relics have begun to suffer damage. His stats are deteriorating, the permitted amount of relic uses is being consumed, and his luck is being overwhelmed by a threatening presence. And anything he tries based on luck will result in failure, and his performance began to decline, and Irene asks him to let go, slapping the girl's hand, and she apologized, saying she got too excited to see him, ended up going too far, and then one of the henchmen asks the other why Jorian acting like this, and Loro asks how he'll know, saying that he's acting as if he's seen a ghost or something, and then one of them says he remembered, saying he remembered who this woman is, and she's Irene Hilt, and he's sure of it. And so they are surprised that it's that American woman from the Hilton family, that rich woman, and they say they're right because he remembered seeing her face on the internet. Before, he asks if the protagonist is the one who won several jackpots at the casino, saying he's been looking for him everywhere, and if he agrees, he could tell him how he did it. But the protagonist questions why one of the richest people in the world is curious about him winning jackpots, finding him strange. He says she must be mistaken, and they all leave. Then Loro asks the protagonist if he knows who that woman is, saying it's Irene Hilt, noting that she came there just for him. He dismisses her, asking if he's listening, telling him to stop, asking to talk to her, calm things down, telling him not to miss this chance. But the protagonist gets angry with those idiots, and one of them goes to talk, but all three collapse just from being near her, feeling stomach pain and various others. So the protagonist just tells them to leave quickly, and when they move away from that woman full of bad luck, the protagonist tells them to count well, saying they should stay as far away as possible. The protagonist, Loro, asks what he's talking about, and the protagonist says that when they recover, they should find a place to protect the bags of money. They question where the protagonist is going, and he says he's going to the auction. After it's over, he'll call them to bring the money, and he thinks that plan will earn him a little more. But he can't do anything. He can't lose any more before the auction. As he gets there, he thinks there shouldn't be any reason for that woman to come after. But then some people start talking near the protagonist, saying that this entrance is for extremely important people, and that commoners like him shouldn't enter. The protagonist notices Yanshu, Shu Kyuan's right-hand man, who looks much younger than before, but his face is still unmistakable, because that damned man is there, meaning he is too Kyuan-ara. While he asks the president if they can enter, the protagonist is shocked to see him there, realizing they've finally. He remembers when he was about to die, challenging that snake as it was about to bite him, and he says he'll rip out its guts, and that of that wretched Kyuan Taejong, stating that even if he becomes a ghost, he'll pursue him to the ends of the earth, kill him. Kyuan Taejong walks past, looking at the protagonist, who ignores. The protagonist notices that he still doesn't recognize, but he'll take all the relics he can get during the auction, and this time he'll be the winner. But then he notices a huge murmur behind him, and everyone is questioning why his stocks are falling and people are losing money, and the cell phone stops working, and so the protagonist is surprised because it's that woman again, noticing that she followed him there, and as he walks away, she asks him to stop, so he questions how she found him among all the people, but she continues asking him, please listen, saying that there's nothing more she can do, saying that she's desperate, but as he tries to escape, he bumps into a door, and she asks if he's okay, because he hit the door hard, and the protagonist gets increasingly angry, and he asks her if he looks okay, asking her to stop following. Because this is happening because of her, and she says that's exact, and that's her problem, and he's surprised, wondering what the hell. The answer was this, and then the girl looks back and says she doesn't know if he'll believe what she's about to say, but it seems she brings bad luck to everyone around her, and that's why she wants her luck to be as great as his, saying it's because she believes that's the only way to make the people around her happy. Then he remembers her, saying she's the goddess of failure, who destroyed the finances of many and caused catastrophes in many countries. So why is she acting like? He asks if she's pretending, and then the girl takes his hand again, asking if he can tell her what to do to make her luck good as him, saying she's willing to do anything, asking him to do it again, saying that if it's money, she can give him as much as he wants. Then the system throws several notifications at, and he receives debuff after debuff, until it says that because he was exposed to that harmful aura of a divine rank relic, his tolerance is activated, and it starts to increase, increasing more and more. Then he notices that this is the ability he acquired by taking that silver pill, and at that time he said that he only knew about the existence of the ability, and he notices that the ability finally activated because of that, and it activated because of the attack of that relic. He then thinks that everything is fine, saying that he was just thinking about one thing. And so she apologizes because what she asked was a little sudden. However, the protagonist thinks that if what happened now is true, then there is no reason for him to avoid this woman. And besides, having this woman around will also increase his tolerance, and she can help him during the auction, ruining the chances of the other participants. He will kill two birds with one stone. But he questions Sayoko, and that he is annoyed with his subordinate, shouting rabbit all the time. And the protagonist notices that he is also under the effect effects of that relic, and if it were before, he would have left that place immediately. And this means that he doesn't know about the existence of the goddess of failure, so he thinks that the enemy of his enemy is his friend, and he can make good use of this woman. So he says that her proposal doesn't seem bad, and she gets all excited, but he says that there's something she needs to understand. Getting lucky is difficult, and she says that's clear, saying that she understands that very well. He thinks that even if he wants to talk more details about this exchange, he has to go to the auction soon, asking if it's okay with if she would like to go to the auction, saying that it's completely understandable he doesn't want, since the entrance ticket is quite expensive, but she says that's fine, saying that it's not a problem for her. But the protagonist thinks to himself that he already knew she was coming, because the entrance fee is like pocket change, and he thinks about Irene, saying he's curious about what she'll become, and then he introduces the entire welcome auction to everyone, saying that the 74th auction is about to begin, and then he talks about the first item on the list. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks it's quite empty, because after letting Irene and Hilton come to the auction, within 3 minutes the number of auction participants dropped by half, and most of them left deal with their sudden problem. And it seems that Sayoko didn't leave even with his fact in China fire. So that means there's something he definitely wants at the auction. The girl says that the object in question is apparently a real Russian wine for over 100 years, asking if he's not going bid. He says that the objects he's interested in will only appear towards the end of the auction, and the girl understands him. He keeps observing her out of the corner of his eye, remembering that she is the goddess of misfortune, Irene Hilton, and she is completely different from what he remembered. But it doesn't seem like he's pretending. The strangest part of this whole mess is that she went to talk to him, saying that she doesn't know if he'll believe what she's going to say, but it seems that she brings bad luck to everyone around her. He says it's because she seems to know nothing about the relics, but he thinks it's possible that perhaps the relic she has became attached to her without her knowledge. This means that originally the goddess of misfortune was a kind-hearted person, but because of the bad luck of the relic that became attached to her without her knowing, her life changed drastically, and this caused her personality change as well. So he thinks that seems plausible, and the girl calls him again, saying she wanted him to know she's truly grateful for what he's doing. He asks what she's grateful for, and she says that just the fact that he listened to her and believed what she said already makes her happy, saying she feels much better having someone she can talk to about her problem. Froda says that's not a big deal, but then he receives another notification saying that because of the user's improved mood, the relic's time is starting to intensify, and the relic's power is explosively increasing. She asks Froda what he means by not a big deal, saying that it makes her super happy, and all that happiness brings a huge wave of bad luck affecting everyone, and even an earthquake starts. My friend, please make this girl cry. That's really lame to say, but she can't be happy. Then the system says that the relic's aura explosively spread across a 1-kilometer area, and a great misfortune began to envelop. The relics in her possession began to receive critical damage, and then they all started talking to Froda, saying they were being torn in half, asking what he was doing, telling Froda to do something. He said he couldn't believe that the happier she got, the stronger the effects of her relic also be. He questioned what kind of psychopathic relic she, and thought that her tolerance skill was increasing very quick, but if it continued like this, her relics would break. He told her not to get her hopes up so much, because he would feel bad if they couldn't reach a consensus on their exchange. But she said that, thinking about it, they hadn't even discussed what they would do for each other. And he said that besides, just because her luck would get better, how can she be so sure that this will stop the bad luck brings to the people around her? She thinks he's right, saying she doesn't think it's guaranteed. Due to the user's worsening mood, the relic's power returns to normal, and Froda is somewhat relieved. Meanwhile, Rossi from the auction says there seems to have been a slight tremor, but apparently everything's been resolved. The current bid for the item in front of him is $770,000, and he asks if anyone will make another offer. One of the men there offers $1 million. And the other questioned what he was planning, and he said that if she agreed, he can raise his offer, and he will raise his even more. And the other gets angry, asking if he thinks he can screw him over, and Froda notices that they are not in a normal mental state because of the relic's aura. But then he realizes that he can use this relic to eliminate the rest of the participants, and seeing that the girl is all down, he tells her that she doesn't need to be sad, because it's not guaranteed that increasing her luck won't solve her problem of bringing bad luck others, saying that they will then go down to business, remembering that she said she wanted to know how she can increase her luck, saying that he will tell her how she can do it, and the girl becomes cheerful again, and Froda sees that things are going as he wants, and he says that he purposely spoke to Irene Hilton favorable words so that she would be in a good mood. He tricked her into believing that she could solve all her problems immediately, and since she was in a state of great happiness, the aura of her relic became much stronger than before, and as a result, the participants lost all reason and started bidding on everything they saw, and ended up spending all the money on useless and expensive items. He's glad it worked out, and since everyone spent all their money on whatever they saw in the first half of the auction. He managed to get all the relics he wanted in the second half. There were some relics he had to give to see Okuan, and that was because he wasn't deterred by the relic's aura, and probably because his dominance trait is too high, and he's a real scoundrel. But his knowledge of the relics exceeded his capacity, because the relics he gave to see Okuan weren't very different. So he starts writing about the code of Hammurabi, and also Shakespeare's pen, besides Marie Antoinette's necklace, and says that the divine rank relic mentioned in the prophecy hasn't yet been revealed, and the auction is about to end well. This is strange, so the girl asks if he will continue with his exchange or not, saying that it seems like he's just stalling and buying time. And so he apologized, saying that he thinks it's time to get a little more serious, saying that they're going to a quieter place, and they settled the pending details, finalized their agreement, since the auction is almost over anyway. But then Rossi speaks to everyone, saying that they will begin the surprise event of the night and reveal their final item, saying that the mysterious almond sprout has caught his attention late, and so the protagonist is surprised, along with Seokyuan. He says that it is Qin Shi Huang's plan elixir. Then the elixir begins to speak to everyone, telling them to raise it properly, telling them to stop feeding it with this false sunlight and place it under the true sun. Then the protagonist says it's a divine rank relic, and not only that, it's also a regeneration and healing type, and he thinks he has to get it no matter what. But then Seokyuan raises his hand at the same moment, and the protagonist notices that that damned guy also knows it's an extremely valuable relic, and the protagonist explains that Emperor Qin Shi Huang was a powerful monarch during the Qin dynasty, and rumors say that the elixir of life was discovered. So Emperor Qin Shi Huang sent his servants to various different places to find the elixir first. And after many years of searching for the elixir of life, this item was found packed almonds, and before he died, this relic was already in Seokyuan's possession. At that time, his body was afflicted by a disease due to the relic's deadly aura, and because of this, he became dependent on the fruit produced by the plant to survive. As a result, instead of receiving payment for work, he was only rewarded with fruit, and he ended up having to do everything Seokyuan had. In short, that relic is what allowed Seokyuan to put a noose around his neck, and he's furious with that bastard, noticing that it was in that place where he obtained the relic. He thinks that this time he will steal it from him, because if that relic falls into the hands of that wretch again, then his current life will become a repetition of his past. Ho-Si is happy about this, noticing that it caught the attention of some of them, who seemed to say that this was to be expected, since the fruit of this tree is known for restoring. The protagonist is surprised by Seokyuan's magnificent virility, which causes him to take a step back. The protagonist, furious, thinks about the ignorant man's explanation of what he means by restoring virility, saying it's shameful because the girl is looking at him strangely. The initial bid is set at $200,000, and the protagonist raises it to $300,000. Seokyuan raises it to $400,000, and then to $500,000. The protagonist continues to raise the bid, but is surprised to see others joining in. Seokyuan then goes crazy, offering $10 million, and begins to feel pressure, questioning if the protagonist will give up. The protagonist questions whether Seokyuan knows that the relic is a divine ranking recovery item, saying he doesn't know how much he knows about, but he does know one thing: he won't be able to compete with him when it comes to money. He then speaks to the girl. To begin their exchange now, she promises to find a solution to her problem, but in return, she must get him that tree over there, saying they will meet each other's needs, asking if she's in, and she says it sounds good to her, saying that when it comes to money, she won't lose. Palopa Sugarman, that crazy guy, is a real swindler, blatantly acting like a Google boy, and the bids are rising exorbitant, reaching up to 50 million. And then Rouge says it seems they've already reached that mark, asking if anyone wants to make another bid. Then Seokyuan bids 100 million, and everyone is surprised by it, and the protagonist sees that that old man is a scoundrel, because anything above $100 million is out of his budget, a lost relic for him from the beginning. And then Rossi asks if anyone will bid beyond. Then the small, white papaya stands up, and the girl offers $150 million, and the protagonist thinks this is a perfect time for the substitution, and everyone is surprised. Then Seokyuan doesn't even believe it. He offers $160 million, and then the girl offers $200 million, smile, and he is horrified, because she wasn't making any offer before, asking why she's doing it now, and the subordinate then says that it's better if they give up, and he questions what he's saying, and the boy says that if he's not mistaken, that woman there is Irene Hilton, and she's the youngest daughter from the wealthy Hilton family, and the amount of money what they have is immeasurable. So he gets angry, telling them to burn in hell, offering $220 million, saying he won't back down now that he's come this far. And the girl offers $300 million, and the protagonist sees that this vision is very pleasurable, because they managed to beat Seokyuan for twice the value. And in the end, the elixir ended up going to Irene for around $500 million. My friend, that's a hell of a lot of money. Can't even imagine, man. And after all this, the protagonist leaves to live, saying that $500 million is a considerable price even for her. But she says says no, saying that the price wasn't something she had to worry too much about, and he's surprised, but thinks that this was really desperation. So she asks how he plans to share his luck, asking if he'll give her an amulet that will increase her luck like a rabbit's foot, or something else like that. But the protagonist says that, in fact, there's nothing he can't. He gives her the gift, and the girl is surprised, asking if he was deceiving her, but he says no, asking her to listen to until the end, saying that her problem is not something that can be solved by getting or gaining more things, and the way they can solve it is by taking one little thing away. She is surprised, and he says that in short, she only needs to give him an object hat, and he thinks that's exact because the only way to solve her problem is by getting rid of the unlucky relic hat, but doing so will allow her to receive the unlucky relic, and in the end, it's a situation that benefits her even more. He is sure that she must have realized that she possesses a strange object that follows her wherever she goes, and she only has to give it to him. Doing so will solve her problem. She thinks about this object, saying that she doesn't think she has such an object, but he says that's impossible, telling her to try throwing away all the belongings she has now, and one of them must be responsible. She says she's tried this before, but none ever came back, and he thinks that's strange. So he asks about tattoos, asking if she has any that appeared on her body one day. Then the girl remembers, and the protagonist realizes she has one. He explains that generally, relics are divided into two main categories: disposable relics and possession. The tattoos that appear on the user's bodies are possession relics, which is why Sasaki Yuka also had a tattoo on her arm. He says that by forming a bond with the guide from the future, a possession relic creates a tattoo as a sign of becoming its master. Anyone can use disposable relic, but these relics have an internal usage limit. Unlike disposable relics, possession relics have no usage limit. However, they can only be used by their master, and he says that all the powerful relics that were monopolized in the past were possession. The girl says she can show him a picture of, and he notices that it's extending from her arm to her abdomen. He's surprised to see that, and the girl asks what's wrong, if there's a problem. He explains that Irene's relic is a parasitic type, and these relics are quite rare, but they forcibly live within the user's body. Since her relic was a divine-ranking relic with a reputation for bringing bad luck, he expected it to be something like a golden apple of Era. He questions what kind of relic she possesses, but he says one thing is certain: he won't be able to extract that terrifying ability. Regarding her body, he says he thought it would be simple, but it seems he was wrong. He gives her his number, saying that when they have more time, they'll try to find a solution together. He also says that if he can't force the extraction of this ability, it's better to make her his ally, as forming connections with others isn't a bad idea and could be useful some. The auctioneer then says that since he's paid for the almond tree, it's now officially. He says he can receive the other item after making the payment. The protagonist says he'll tell his subordinates to come with the payment. He questions why those bastards aren't attending to, wondering if something is wrong, even if he left a cat guarding fish. He asks the owner to wait a moment, saying it's nothing serious, except that he'll be very well rewarded. Meanwhile, all three idiots are running off with all the protagonist's money, and he says that since they've come this far, damn it, you won't be able to find him, questioning why those backpacks are so heavy. One of them says they're going to rest a bit because they're out of breath too, asking if they have all the back, and they confirm it. But then, something comes close to Seong Woo's face and almost rips his head off. The protagonist thinks they had the nerve to take his money and run away, and they're shocked that Jorian has already found them. The protagonist thinks with Seong Woo that using the golden axe, it's not difficult to find him, so they say they were just bringing it, but the protagonist tells them to stop making excuses, unless they want their heads blown off, and they say they made a big mistake. The protagonist says he thinks he'll have to use it right, so they ask if that isn't a stone used to clean ones. The protagonist tells them to keep watching because they'll find out soon, and so he starts rubbing that stone, and a pillar appears right behind him, and that stone turns into a. The protagonist holds a square block in his hand, and he explains that the code of laws created by King Hammurabi during the time of ancient Babylon contains one of the most famous phrases in that law: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. As the phrase says, whatever your enemy has done, he will return the favor to, and this is the perfect relic for a counter. He says it's a new relic he acquired today from the auction house, having obtained it a little earlier than usual because of a favor he did for one of the employees, invoking an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, saying he will respond to their betrayal with another betrayal. Then everyone starts to suffer, their wrists are bound, and the protagonist says he wasn't sure how it would work, but it seems everything worked out, and as stated in the code of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is a phrase used to retaliate against any attack the enemy uses against you. However, since the code of Hammurabi is also a book of law, he was curious if this relic could also restrict the present and future actions of enemy, because that's what this law is really about. They question what the protagonist just did, and he says it was nothing. I think it can be said that he was just testing the relic's power, and as long as they don't betray him from now on, nothing bad will happen. If they try to do something like that, their bodies will be cut to pieces. And it is said that due to the code of Hammurabi, the relic began to monitor the actions. Selected people are all surprised, and the protagonist says they can consider this as if they had signed a slavery contract. They question what that means, as it's impossible, and say they think this damned man is telling the truth, since the stone pillar appeared and disappeared very quickly. Zeon saw the question about whether he's some kind of psychic, and the protagonist says it's obvious. He also says something else they should know, that the world will turn upside down soon, but they will be fine. They ask if they know why, and he says it's because they are his beloved slave. Even if it's a slavery contract, it's not a bad thing, and he will even compensate them if they do their jobs properly, saying they will get more money than they just tried to steal from it, saying he will let them have all the money they want. They agree, but ask what kind of work they have to do, and the protagonist says they will find out soon. The next day, Zeon arrives complaining, saying he knows. He told them to come there at 9, but asked what that was all about. The protagonist questioned why they were confused, explaining that it was all part of their job. He asked if they saw that little tree over there, saying their mission was to take care of it. They were surprised, asking why the tree was writhing. The protagonist explained that it wasn't about to bite, so they should hurry and plant it in that pot. He said it was better if they didn't do it again, and that the tree was worth $500 million, so they should take good care of it. They were surprised by the value. Then the plant started talking, asking who the clueless human was, saying that the way he was holding it felt good, and that's how he liked it. He said humans should touch it like that, and that it would accept them for now. The protagonist said that it seemed these three had a high degree of socialization, and that last night he managed to form a contract with that tree. But that almond tree was screaming so loudly. He's high up, unable to sleep, and he says that the plant hates users with a strong dominance trait, and generally prefers users with a high socialization, and it seems that those three are the perfect babysitters for the plant, and he left them with the job of dealing with the plant, mainly because he didn't want to take care of that thing. But it seems they are really perfect for the job. But while he's thinking, someone calls him, noticing that the number, even though he didn't save it, is already a very familiar number, and CEO Quan comes to talk to the protagonist, saying that he is the CEO of KBM, and the protagonist then pretends not to know what it's about, asking what business he has with, noticing that this is the old man's personal number, and since he's calling, it means he's already started investing, and CEO Quan says he'll get straight to the point, saying he heard that he was the one who received the almond tree from Irene Hilton, and the protagonist notices that he's quick, and CEO Quan says he'd like to talk a little with him about that subject, but the protagonist says that if it's about the almond tree, he has nothing to say, and since he's busy, he's going to hanging up on Quan, and he gets pissed at that little shit, and CEO Quan asks what the problem is, asking if the conversation didn't go well, and he says that the boy didn't even listen to what he had to say and hung up, and he's surprised, saying that he's Roger, that he must not have realized it was him, saying that it's ignorance, because he even said, who is CEO of TKBM, and so he wants that. The boy, furious, says that even though he's ignorant, he still has that almond sprout relic, and of all the relics he's seen so far, that one has the strongest aura. He knew he should have done everything he could to get that relic last night, and if it weren't for his interference, he would have fought to the end. The boy begins to apologize, but questions how it's his fault, since he did the best he could in that situation. He thinks he has to solve this problem somehow, as it would actually be the perfect chance for him to gain even more recognition from the president. So he says he'll take full responsibility for everything, and will do everything he can to ensure he keeps the sprout, asking if it would be alright if he get his hands a little dirty to get the relic. He says he's just a commoner, so it wouldn't be difficult to ask permission to use some relic from his warehouse from the company, while Groove is surprised that the protagonist is talking to Quan Taejong from the KBM company, asking how on earth he knows who he is, but only knew that he hung up on the guy, and he says that the protagonist is incredibly rude, asking if he doesn't follow the news, saying that he is the most influential, powerful person in his country, but the protagonist just finds them noisy, and says that they are being very rude to his boss, asking if they want him to chop in half with that axe, and Groove says that he was just trying to explain but the protagonist says that he's going out for a bit, telling them to continue taking care of that tree, and tells them to check and take a picture every day of how the tree is doing, and if they try to make a mess again, they should know what will happen, and Groove gets angry saying that he knows, and outside, the protagonist thinks that Quan is the type of person who would do anything to he manages to find something that catches his attention, and he'll soon discover its location and try to surround it. If he wants to keep the plant safe, he'll have to deal with whoever is pursuing. Since the silver axe is reacting now, it means they've already started chasing, and he deliberately left to deceive whoever was after. In the end, they eventually cross paths, and the protagonist notices it's Yanshuo working alone. He notices that it seems they're underestimated, but then he notices he has a relic, and even though the aura is matte, he can still sense it. Since that's the case, it's a good opportunity, and Yan questions how many times they've already gone, asking if they're sure this time. After all, how can he trust him? He asks how difficult it is for him to locate just one person. person. And I said that if he continues like this, he won't receive any payment. But then Godelho looks to the side. The protagonist is drinking alone. Then Yan arrives, asking if he happens to Johi, and the protagonist realizes he took the bait, happy that he's so stupid, noticing that he didn't even realize he fell into his trap. And Yan sees that the protagonist is completely ignoring him because he knows the boy hurt him. So he tries to talk to the protagonist again, but is ignored again, and so he slams his hand on the table, asking if the protagonist is deaf, saying that when someone is talking to him, he should at least answer. But then the protagonist turns around, throws him to the ground, questioning who the hell raised him, asking if he has the nerve to yell in someone's face when he sees them, and if he has any business, then he should call him politely. And Yan says that he started, and the protagonist says that now that he's there, he can feel the relic's aura even more. He's being strong, saying he's going to keep that relic, and taking the opportunity to give that sucker a good shake. It's as if Kyuan discovered the protagonist knew the plant was with him, so he sent someone to locate. However, the person who received the order was Yan Siwoo. He was alone, and even though he is a skilled user with many relics, it won't be enough. Then, he questions how the protagonist dares to hit him, and the protagonist thinks that Kyuan must be underestimated to have only sent Yan, and says that if that's the case, then he'll take all the relics he had, where maybe he should take a lesson etiquette. And so, when he berates the guy, he gets furious. Yan says he'll let it slide for the president's sake, mentioning that they met last night at Mito, and that it was about, but the protagonist questions his seriousness, as he doesn't remember seeing him. Then Yan tells him to stop joking because he knows he saw him, and the protagonist says that now he remembers, saying that he's the loser who was sucking up to that old man. And Yan gets really pissed, asking what the hell the protagonist said, and he receives a notification saying that the opponent is starting to lose his composure, and so control over the relics diminish, and the protagonist says it was worth. That's the weakness of that damned guy, because Yan has always been easily affected by what others say, and even though he acts like he's great on the outside, he has a huge inferiority complex. He was once the heir to a large company, but because of that role, he made some mistakes, joked around too much, and eventually was disinherited fire. And it's thanks to Seokyuan that he achieved some kind of success, and he may be working hard for that old man, but because he's trying to gain more approval and recognition from the president, he's never bowed down to anyone else in his entire life. And when he worked for TKBM, that bastard did everything he could to pick a fight, but if you poke at his wow, he'll always lose his temper and explode. So he asks if the protagonist is finished talking, saying he won't let this go, pointing a stick at the protagonist. So he says that because of this, he became unable to high-ranking relic proper. And he says that this is because control over the relics depends heavily on the user's condition. And he says that he just has to take advantage. And the protagonist says that, now that he's thought about it properly, Sayakuan called him early, but he really needs that virility plant, questioning what he supposes it does. Then, Ion questions what nonsense he's talking, and the protagonist says that all he's saying is that he won't be able to give away that plant so easily. And he says that, in fact, if he asks nicely, maybe he could give it to him, since that plant is something he received as a gift. So, he can give it to him if he really wants to. Ion gets really angry, but ends up bumping his head against the protagonist, thanking him for his cooperation, and asking if he could give him that plant, saying it's very important to him. But he keeps thinking to himself that, after getting that plant, it's worth tearing it pieces. However, the protagonist starts laughing, questioning if he really believed all he wanted was to have someone funny like as his subordinate. And then, Ion questions how he dared, removing the cap from a test tube and lunging at the protagonist, saying he knew he should have done this from the start. He says he's going to turn him into his slave, kill him. But the protagonist asks if he really dares to do that, saying it's better he doesn't. And in that, he questions why not. This is work, while the protagonist calmly dodges his attack. Then he grabs his head, slamming his face directly against the wall, asking if he didn't warn him. Then, Ion starts screaming because his nose is broken, and the protagonist says that of course he didn't warn them, not after his control over the relics diminished. Then, the system says that the opponent's temper drastically decreased, and the opponent's control over the relics has dropped to rank D from rank. Then, it questions whether the protagonist knows about the relic, and he says that of course he knows, saying that he's going to take it from his hand. Then, Ion keeps asking wait, and the protagonist notes that it's a possession relic, saying that he is now its new master. Then, the relic questions who the protagonist is, since the power to control it is gone, saying it will be under their care. Then, it throws it at Ion's back, who begs it to stop, begging it to do anything but, and the protagonist says that the name of this relic is Zombie Priest's Voodoo Pouch. She is not only a rank A possession relic, but also possesses incredible skill. And voodoo originated among African people when they were enslaved. One of the beliefs of voodoo was that whoever was guilty of their sins would be transformed to a zombie. And this rumor gained widespread traction and was accepted as truth, which eventually led to the creation of this relic. He says that if you touch or inhale this powder, you temporarily lose consciousness and become a zombie. He thinks being used by his own relic suits him, but this should now delay Sayokyuan's attempt to pursue it. He has to hurry and grab his things while there's still time, and thinks it's time to leave. After a while, Kyuan Taejong finds out what happened and goes to the prison to see Ion, and he asks if that's one of his own. So Kyuan leaves him there, and then the man asks if he was one of their own, and one of them says says that's exact, stating that he is their department head, Ion. And then, the protagonist sees in the newspapers that Ion took off his clothes and went out naked into the streets causing a mess. And Kwon gets very angry about this shameful action, and someone arrives calling the president, asking what they will do, because it seems that they are not willing to turn a blind eye to this. And it seems that leader Ion is still not perfect mental condition. And Kwon says there's not much they can do in this case, saying they'll have to accept his order. And this problem has spread not only throughout the United States, but also in Korea. And his name was linked to this problem, since he was associated with this scandal. So how dare he bring shame to his name and order him to retrieve the relic that damned man is using right now. But then, one of them speaks to him, saying that when they arrested leader Ion, they said he had nothing. And it seems that all his belongings were confiscated or stolen by some. Kwon gets even more irritated. One of them says they'll start investigating the place's Ion's, but Kwon says there's no need, as it's quite obvious that whoever caused Ion's condition took the relic. So, they realize that the reason leader Ion ended up like this was someone else. But they say that leader Ion is very experienced with use of relics. So, who could have done this to? And he says that for sure it was that damn Johi, because it's possible that he has a large company covering. It's also possible that he is skilled with Relic, and he orders the men to send his lawyer, Lee Jing-han. And he says that, in the end, he's just a kid. He'll be quiet if someone gives him some candy. Buddy, I sense that double meaning. And at the Las Vegas domestic airport, Karen Seong asks Johyun what happened this time. And the protagonist tells the boy to address him with more respect, instructing him to make sure they don't lose any of it, as it will be his safety net from now on. But then, the boy says that it doesn't seem to be anything valuable, and the protagonist thinks he's found some relics there. And now, he just needs to get them all safely to Korea, because the relics he collected in Korea were the Egyptian embalming knife and the gold and silver axes, besides the firewood. And at the auction house, he got the Code of Hammurabi, and also Shakespeare's pen and Marie Antoinette's neck. And last but not least, the medicinal plant Emperchi. He also has the zombie powder he stole from Yan Si-woo, along with the fox-tail tick Homer's glasses. And that's more than enough to fund his relic excavate. He'll be able to collect even more relic from now on. But then, Seokwon's lawyer shows up, asking if he's Jo Hyun, saying she's TKBM's exclusive lawyer. The protagonist notices she's there, and that he's Seokwon's right-hand man, asking what he's plotting. She then meets with the protagonist to talk, saying they know they have Mr. Owon's belonging, and that there's no need to deny or defend themselves against it. In fact, his president thinks his skills are excellent enough to surpass Mr. Eon. So, she says she's there to offer him the job, and they want him to work for the TKBM excavation, and the protagonist says he's wondering why she came there, but it was because of a damn slavery contract. And the girl is surprised, saying his words are quite hard, saying he won't get a better offer than that. And she says they'll give her a payment $100 million. Furthermore, he will also receive an annual salary. They will not interfere in his daily life, and his work will be solely affiliated with TKB. But the protagonist questions whether, in case he refuses, saying that this offer has no value for him. He already knows what that old man planned. Then, she speaks to Mr. Eon, saying that she will give him some life advice, as someone who has lived longer than. She says that when he is talking to someone else, it's best that he choose his words carefully, because this practice is not only good for him, but for everyone. But she will let it pass, since he is still young and lacks life experience. She asks if he has considered the consequences his act of theft might, and if Mr. Eon takes action against him. For example, when a small cockroach dies in a small town market, it disappears without a trace, and no one will remember its existence. And the same principle applies there. And the people associated with him will all disappear without a trace, telling him not to ever think that he is an exception. But the protagonist says that here they go. And now she's showing who she really is, asking if she's trying to threaten, saying that she basically said that if he doesn't want to die, he has to work for her, speaking with the lawyer, saying that she'll give her some advice as well, because when she's trying to stir up trouble, she should know how to choose her opponents carefully. And that's assuming, of course, that she values her life, and the only person who will disappear without a trace there is her. Then she notices that this is the protagonist's zombie's relic, and she says that she knows he won't be able to use a relic with so many people around, unless he wants the existence of the relics to be made public. And he notices that's why she was so confident about all of it, asking if she really thinks he wouldn't be able to do it. Then, that's when she gets quite surprised. Young Woo hears a scream coming from where Jo Hyun, and they question whether he should go there. And the girl tells him to take it off, because he threw zombies powder on his arm, and he questions whether he's crazy, saying he doesn't believe really using his relic. And the protagonist says he doesn't care if the world knows about the existence of the relics or not, because he's different from them, questioning what they're doing, telling them to film it, saying it's really cool to see all that glittery dust around. And then after they filmed it, they must make make sure to stop him everywhere. And the girl notices that he's crazy, and the protagonist says that since she's still okay, after coming into contact with the dust, he thinks his control over the relic must be very high. If she has any relics with her, she'd better use them now, because her next attack, it won't be so easy to avoid. And then she realizes there's no other way. Grabbing a bottle, and he fires his water can at the protagonist, and he says that's not bad at all, but he says he has that relic, invoking the code of Hammurabi, so he can throw water back, and he uses the eye for an eye principle, and it's an eye for an eye, ordering a return attack, and the girl gets all wet. Then she is surprised that this is the code of Hammurabi, and he says that it is exact. Then he pulls out a silver flat, ordering the enemy cut down, the one he seeks to harm, and then she asks him to wait, because she has lost, asking him to forgive. And then, Ongwu shows up. He asks Johi, what the hell is he doing? Asking if he's planning on killing someone instead of killing them. It tilts the daylight, but the protagonist tells them not to worry, because this won't kill anyone, but it will destroy everything valuable she had. Then the girl is surprised, and the protagonist attacks her. Meanwhile, they go up to where he is, saying they heard some kind of explosion at the cafeteria across the street. Then there were the men from Ongwu's group, and him too. They hear all that commotion, and he is surprised, questioning, how dare Johyun do that? And he's the protagonist. He says it's unbelievable, noting that the whole story about some spirits residing inside objects, it was real, and it seems that woman dropped that relic, wondering what kind of skill does she have. And her Ongwu question, what are these relics? And so, while the protagonist, that paint from Manhwa come from Parrot, and she's the disposable type, and he tells them that they'll know soon. And so, the relic speaks to, telling him to follow what his voice command, and the place where he is. Soon, it will fall into deep chaos, and the protagonist is surprised by the voice he is hearing. It's about the crow. So Mr. Ongwu asks him what he's talking about, saying that he is him scaring, asking, questioning, why is he talking to the air? And the protagonist, note that, it seems they can't hear his voice. And the raven, tell him to follow your command. Now, and the protagonist, he tells him to stop giving him orders. Getting angry with the crow, he said he sent it to the path without any warning, and it changed his life in a cheap imitation of a game. And now, finally, he decides to talk, but the crow, he says he'll regret it for not following his order. Then the protagonist, tell him not to even joke around, asking question if he thinks he'll believe it, in the words of a relic. But in that, Kyuan, he arrives over there, saying that the protagonist, he put on a show, asking question if he is Shu or Hien, and the protagonist, he's surprised, from Kyuan, Taiju, get there. And he says yes. Then Seongyu is surprised, questioning, what's happening? What if the boy? Everything will be alright. So Kyuan, say it's the first time, who sees him, and so, they greet each other. But, before he could do anything, Seongyu noticed that his body doesn't move, and the protagonist realizes that that bastard is using one of his relics, and it's emanate a very sinister hour from his body. Then the protagonist, pulling out his dagger, going after him, going behind Kyuan, putting the knife down on his neck, and he says it's a little problematic if he acts like that, saying that he shouldn't, trying to dominate human, especially if they were subordinates of someone else. Probably, it would be better than him. Harass Kyuan, he becomes filled with fear, saying that he understands, saying that's the reason why Yayan, Seiyu, and her lawyer to have been placed in that state, and all of us, they're never free. Then he says that his skills are better than expected, and he does too. He seems to have an exceptional talent controlling his relic, saying that he doesn't think so, that he'll be able to if he holds on, just like before. Then the protagonist is surprised, and Kyuan, he says there was a prophecy that he heard a while ago. Someone said that the day would come where the world would know about the existence of relics, and the protagonist, note that then he managed to get some prophecy using the guide to and Kyuan says he doesn't want to. May this happen even more so, because there are many things. What does he want to do with these relics? Then he speaks, which he came to the conclusion that if he gets rid of all the people who know regarding the existence of the relic, then the day that the prophecy mentioned will take longer to arrive, asking if that isn't the perfect to get rid of, like him, launching that black right at the protagonist, and all of they are affected by it, and the protagonist realizes that it's already shown, it's Fang, and in that, Kyuan questions, why aren't they disappearing? He mentions that this relic, I should have sent one of to a dimension very far from out, but the protagonist questions whether he's talking about that relic over. So Kyuan, he's surprised. He asks, when did he steal it? And the protagonist says he stole it. She told him just now, saying that, as you can see, he's very skilled with his hand, saying she's going to use it. She's doing it perfect. And Kyuan, he gets really pissed off with the kid, for sure. That's the area code. That one. It's 21. Speaking of which, things are complicated here in Rio de Janeiro. It's tough. There's robbery everywhere. We're just joking around, but business is tough. So Kyuan, question, how dare the boy steal his relic? And the protagonist, he says that he should have done a better job in protecting and the skill, which he often boasts about, but his hands were light. So, he questions, how does that damned man feel now? And the skill, he stole it. He rises to rank D. He unlocked a title, the thief. Impressive, even to the gods. He received a rank change. His skill level increased. he discovers a new ability. Those are the light and the protagonist. Okay, note that he will continue with this whole gambling, thinking you're right, and it doesn't matter anymore. Sending him, just inspect the states of this relic for him, and that's it. He receives the invitation from the solitary god. Rank SS, going up to, for divine rank, a consumable relic with 43. He uses 50 in total, and he's surprised that it be a divine rank. Speaking of which, it's control of domination. It's still a bit low for this type of relic. For now, I'm really thinking about, I wanted to send that old man to another dimension, but still, he keeps it. And Kyuan asks if he's still willing to adopt, and given that, he made a big mistake. If he thinks that this is the only relic, he has them. He had other relics, powerful ones, and one of the relic, the strongest, that he possessed. It was the Conqueror's relic, and that relic has power to take control of someone else's mind and make them be completely obedient, just like Irene Hilton's relic. And that one, it's a relic that he had of the parasitic kind. He never finds out the precise detail about that relic because that old man kept it a secret, and that's all he knows because it resides somewhere in his body, and he thinks that he could try cutting off his arm and leg outside to gain more information, but that's not something he can do because that dam, it also has a relic of armor. So, how I question, what was it? Asking if the boy is scared now. He's still saying that it didn't fully act, the relic and the protagonist. Think of it in other words, his body. That's basically an impenetrable fort that was equipped with weapons, extremely strong. However, since the relic of the conqueror, it is associated with consciousness of the people. When activated, it is a relic, extremely loud and chaotic. What if he start using that relic everywhere? It's going to descend into chaos. And the protagonist, he questioned, what a racket. All of that because he thought that he didn't want to, that the existence of the relics we discovered. But good, he says that. He just means that he has to deal with more people later. But he decided that he will be another problem case. He'll let you live. Now, it's time to obey in silence. But then, and Relic talked to them, saying that those humans, stupid, they must stop your action all at once. And both of they are surprised. Then cover up, saying that this is a dangerous where they already exist. Fierce, dog, jackal, and cases. They don't stop using their power. They will wake from their long rest. And Quan, so he's surprised that it's a relic and her aura. It's powerful. Speaking of wit, it must be a relic. High rank and the protagonist. So think about what he said about those jackal dogs, asking if there are any legends. Something about jackal dog. Anyway, he wondered, is it about the god of death, Anubis from Egyptian mythology? And that means that this place is a tomb which contains the relic of Anubis. And Quan, he thinks so. In fact, that's wonderful. Speaking of wit, after he finishes off the boy, he will retrieve that relic for himself, summoning even more from its aura. But then another relic, he speaks, saying that they are too naive. Then an earthquake begins, and everyone is surprised. And Quan questions what the heck that, and the protagonist, he receives several notifications. So, an abnormal amount of deadly Egyptian aura is entering your body, and because of the power of the mortal relic, their relics, they will begin taking damage. An abnormal amount of relics, powerful, they could cause the apocalypse. It has begun emerging, and so the protagonist, you won't believe it, it's a major catastrophe. And that scene which he witnessed, definitely it was the great catastrophe. It was an event, it was a signal, the beginning of a chaotic era full of relics. And the airport, it was split in half by structure from ancient Egypt that emerged from the ground, and definitive, it was the tomb of the relic of Anubis. And the airport, or rather the world, was changing in a giant tomb, and the great catastrophe overall. That's when the giant tombs began to appear, affecting the whole world. Las Vegas, Tokyo, Seoul, and several other places. And the system speaks that the malicious Egyptian tomb, they started appearing all over the world. And the protagonist, so he's surprised, wondering what should he do now. And what if Anga called Jory, asking what the hell, what's happening? And he says it's nothing magic, saying that's all, that they're all in jail inside a dangerous tomb. As they can see, this all happened because that old man over there couldn't stop showing his strength. But he speaks that this never happened when he used his relics. So Anga asks if he means they're trapped, asking how are they going to escape. And the protagonist speaks that if they want to leave, since it's a tomb, they just need to close it. And after closing that tomb, it won't be easy. And he thinks that in his past life, it took him 3 months to finish a tomb created by the great catastrophe. But things are different now. And she thinks, either way, it's good that they're starting right in the heart of the tomb, asking them to follow, for they will find it, the supposed master of this tomb. But then, Anga tells them to wait, saying that he never said that they could leave, attacking the protagonist again with his relic. And the protagonist asks if he will still act like, even in a situation like, asking if it wouldn't be something common. They figured out a way to finish that tomb soon. But he speaks, who can think about, after killing, and beside that too, I mean he can keep that relic from that tomb as well. And the protagonist then notices that he is too arrogant, but he thinks so, that it's not trust, it's unfounded, realizing that he won't have what he used to, saying that's what you'll have to do, whatever it takes, to get out of there alive. But then, Quan himself sends his relic. They obey now, and all of them, let it be a proverb. And the protagonist thinks, as always, that the old man is being too impatient, but Quan is surprised, because his speech is still quite vulgar, saying that's not how it is, that he needs to talk to someone, that he is now his master. master. And that's it. Seiyugu notices that they are being crushed, speaking with Jurin that they are going to die. But Kwon thinks that's strange because it seems like he can't win them over. None of them now. And generally, most people, they would lose consciousness. But then, someone speaks to them, saying that he was right. Those damned humans, they have the potential to dominate, and so many protagonists, as well as Kwon. They look to the side, scared, and then they ask, who are they? And those things in the sky, they say that's what he's saying, asking who he is, to be causing the problem within his domain. And the protagonist, he thinks he's free, saying he should be, because he's a relic of the conqueror. It's not working proper. Definitely not. It's the relic of 7, of rank, divine. And he speaks that taking away all the things that could appear in front of him, it had to be that damn thing. The protagonist, he was one of the 9 major gods, and he was the god of the desert, from darkness, from chaos, and from evil. And because of that, the relic of 7, it was extremely violent and malicious. And that relic, it was known for destroying the life of any relic who possessed it. But then, another relic, enough to say that being dominated by a human is unimaginable. They must get rid of them. And 7 speaks, which is clear. They must destroy them without mercy. Those filthy humans, they are surprised. Another one has a, and the protagonist, note that there are 2 of them, noting that black dog, it must be Anubis, and the collar, that extravagant dress, it must be Osiris, and that jewel, it symbolizes Osiris, and it speaks that Osiris, he was one of the 9 major gods, and he was the god of fertility, of the afterlife, and Anubis, he was the god of death, from the tomb, and he was the god who guided the dead to the afterlife. And he thinks that in addition to that, there's also the number 7. The number 7, he doesn't believe it, because all 3 relics from divine Ankh, they appeared there, without a doubt, that in her past life, it was full of an immeasurable quantity from the tumble. Then, 7, question, what trials should they appoint for them to enjoy their time by killing them? So, Anubis speaks that he's still not sure, but then 7 tells him to wait, saying that it doesn't matter because there's no reason to assure them a challenge. But then Anubis commands he should have some dignity, but he's asking about speak that he's already annoyed because I have to share the same space with those filthy humans. And that's it. The protagonist receives several notifications thinking that this is interesting, and the system speaks that due to the aura of a malevolent relic, his immunity, it started to increase. He says he doesn't think so. May those damn dogs planning to leave you alive. He asks himself, what is he talking about? So, 7 speaks that he must go first. Later, the best way to deal with those insignificant beings, it is by oppressing with their strength. And the protagonist is surprised that he's coming full of hate. He wants to kill everyone, and he speaks. So, the relic of 7 began to attack the other 2. They attacked 2 in a matter of seconds. Malicious auras surrounded. Then, they all start bleed, becoming desperate, and some of them, they even fall to the ground. So, Xiangyu, question, what are they doing? Asking if they're okay. And the protagonist speaks. As expected, no immune system function. The body will quickly give out to deteriorate. Enes, even the old man, he falls to the ground, asking, what's happening? Why is his body like? And the protagonist, no, even that old man isn't safe from that aura. So, he says that they have to get out of seeking shelter, and since they are useless for these relics, they should be able to get out of. But Xiangyu speaks. She doesn't know whether she should be happy or sad with that, and he calls everyone to stand up, ordering them to hold on hard. But the other one tells Xiangyu, who is also bleeding. However, still, he needs to take another one, and the old man asks, where the hell they think they're going, and so does he. Ask the protagonist, how is he? Perfectly fine. And the protagonist speaks for him to consider the difference between their ability, and he questions it. What did the boy say? Cursing him. And Nisati question, why? That human, he's in perfect condition. And Anubis, he even questions whether they underestimate. So, 7, they order him to do his job. Correct, but in that respect, he notices that boy, slightly familiar. And that one, it's the code of Hammurabi. So, the protagonist question, is that all they have? So, they ask, what is it that he plans to do it with that? Well, the rank, this relic is better than this, saying that he's going to regret it for having underestimated, and he emits an aura, an even stronger one, channeled direct to the protagonist. But then, the protagonist summons the eye by the eye, and the tooth by the tooth, sending them, making them taste their own medicine. So, the code of Hammurabi, hold off on that attack, and return it up against C. So, he asks, how is that possible? It could be, and the protagonist speak, what is this? What happens when they just look? Pros rank, and they let their guard down. And newbies speak, what does it seem like? Them, they will have to use something else besides just their aura, sending him, let them use their skill and attack. But Seth refuses, saying that in case they use their skill, your lifespan, it will decrease. And also, he's sure of that, saying that the smell he noticed early, absolutely, it's the smell of a crow, and he can smell it, the scent of that crow coming from over there. But then, Osiris, he is surprised, questioning to the trader who seeks to help human. But tell me, that's impossible, because that mangy thing, it's already there, sealed. And newbies, he even asks if it's his node. Finally, he went mad. But 7, question, how could he? He dared to say that because of his node. That's perfectly fine. And him, who wants it, to wage war against him. But the protagonist, he thinks he was curious because they weren't fighting each other before. And that's it. That's because Set and Osiris were together, and it was inevitable that they would start fighting among themselves. And in Egyptian mythology, 7, he committed a grave sin, and he became envy of his brother Osiris, and it ended up killing. And the historical content of those legends, it also has an influence in how the relics interact connect with you. And the situation, it's favorable for him, thinking that he has to attack when they are focused on something else. But then, Anubis notices that the protagonist, he's starting to plan some, asking if they can regain your senses and focus on your task. But seeing that they won't stop arguing, he thinks that he'll have to deal with this problem by himself. And the protagonist, he speaks, it seems. He's the only one who's aware among them, and he says it's going to end with Anubis first. But Anubis just calls him arrogant. He's saying everything is fine, and he wants to see if he'll be able to survive. So, sure, a circle appeared beneath the protagonist, and it takes over the entire land that was underneath, and he asks, what the hell is that now? Then, Anubis speaks. Someone like him will never be able to pass with his approval, and the protagonist then is surprised, asking if then it's a type of test. So, he falls somewhere. He starts to feel it. His back hurts, noticing that over there, it's a scale. So, Anubis appears before him, saying that this is the scales of judgment, and now he will begin his trial about him, and the protagonist finally understands, noticing that this is his final card. What if he passes the test? That damned man, it will be yours. And since his aura doesn't affect, he resorted to that. But that only created an opportunity so that he may have it in his possession. And in his past life, he knew the original user of the Relic of Anubis, and the user told him that the Relic of Anubis, he's going to ask several, and that's all he needs to say, saying that he couldn't remember of all the questions that the Relic of Anubis asked. But he said, that's the question. They were all easy, and if the question, they were easy enough for a child, answer correct, so he has nothing to worry about. And then Anubis speaks that all the juries are gathered, and now he's going to ask 42 things, and if he can answer no to all those questions, then he will pass with your approval. And if he lies, in any case, those kinds of questions, the monster, which is already in the dark, you will see your guilt, and it will take you a while. And the protagonist, that's exactly what I mean, the boy told. Then he speaks from the first question, asking if he committed the act of robbery, and the protagonist, it was already happening, noticing that he stole, or rather, he has a whole life ahead of stealing, and Anubis is already happy because he already knew that. And the protagonist tell him to wait a bit, saying that he's still thinking about in your question, and Anubis then speak that he can answer the second question, asking if he has ever lied, and the protagonist note that he did a lot of that too. Then Anubis asked if he committed the murder before, or if he destroyed the property of his neighbor, he coveted wealth, his neighbor, and many other things. And the protagonist finally understand what this is like by saying that it wasn't because the question, they said they were easy, that child, it's over, and that's because that boy didn't live long to commit all those sins. And Anubis then believe that's what he's thinking, that he won't be able to answer no at least one of the 42 questions. Questioning if it's not correct, then he speaks as expect of a human. He is surrounded of sin, and so he takes his hand, grabbing the protagonist by the waist, saying that his heart, it's heavier than iron, sending him to hell. That's where he belongs, getting ready to attack in that monster. And the protagonist questioning himself, what the hell is that, asking him to wait at least for a sec, and he noticed that he messed up completely, and that's it. While he is being thrown to that monster, he becomes desperate, noticing that it's fallen again, and so it falls somewhere else, onto a pile of sand full of remains of dead, and he starts to complain that hurt like hell. When he looks to the side, he sees several goats going towards him, and he gets more and more surprised because he can't breathe, not even a little. So he picks up one of the bones over there, telling them to come up, saying he doesn't care if everyone attacks all at once, saying he's going to kill them, all of them. And after hitting the first, he does manage to kill it, but note it, there are many of them. So one of the monsters tries to bite the protagonist, but he manages to hold it. However, the other, they come up likewise, and the protagonist wonders if this is going to be his end, and if he's really going to die. But then the raven speaks to him again, because it seems he needs to from your help, saying that he really is an idiot. And so the protagonist begins to shine, and that shine moved back a little the other ghosts that were coming towards him. And then the crow appeared right in front of the protagonist once again, saying that it's been a while, a long time, from the moment they saw each other. And the protagonist questioning, what is he talking about, asking if this isn't the past, questioning how is that possible. So the crow, he starts laughing, saying it doesn't matter, whatever the timeline, he is the only one. And the protagonist questioning, what the hell is he talking about. And when he looks to the side, he sees those damned who are behind him again. So he speaks, nothing will change in this space, and him, it will help to get out of that place. So he says it would be more fun to use Egyptian to defeat the Egyptian gods. And the protagonist questioning, what the hell is he, and why that's helping you. But then the raven, simply, it unleashes its energy, destroying all those things. Meanwhile, outside, both Seth and Osiris are left thinking it's taking longer than they thought, but they're noticing that dome is breaking, and they question if finally it's done. But Osiris thinks, which is strange, speak that the space of judge created by Anubis, it is being destroyed by force. And Seven, he doesn't believe it, asking if he believes it, that a mere human could do this. And Quan, he's lying on the ground, all sprawled out, just watching. So when space breaks, the two of them, they don't believe it, and they notice that power. Noticing that is the power of the sun god. Ora. Then the raven used the power of Ra and Seth speak. Who knew? Who was that damned thieving crow? So Osiris asked to Anubis, what happened? He was ordered to get up, but Anubis, there's nothing left to say. And 7 speak. That is clear as day that the raven, he did it to him, saying, are you sure that it was sealed? Questioning how he was freed. Speak that he doesn't remember. He was on the side of humanity to destroy it, his brother, and absorb his power, calling him unclean, a sinner, and the protagonist. Question about what? They are talking. What if that's true? And the raven, he doesn't even answer. So Osiris talked to Set. They're going to use it, their power, and they have to deal with given the situation and to warn the other. And 7 speak. No, there is a choice. Speaking that will end with everything. Now that the situation, that's how it is. Releasing everyone, his power up from the raven. So all the space around the raven, it starts to break down, and the protagonist gets scared, and many heads, that one emerging from the ground towards to the protagonist, and the raven speak. No, it will be just that. In this space, this time, and the dead will ride upon everyone, the whole world, saying, no, it can't anymore, to help the protagonist and him speak, the one who knows, saying, no, I didn't expect that it would help, really, but the raven question, 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 the raven question. Then he dodges the first attack from that enormous thing. When the monster passes, he attacks her, but his sword gets stuck in the middle of all that band. He says it's tougher than he thought, but still, he has another dagger, and when he pulls out the relic, she thinks about that energy, saying she feels like home. And the protagonist says that this dagger is an Egyptian embalming, and she's reacting because she's an Egyptian relic too. He says Nordelobes is nearby. He feels very powerful, and the protagonist asks the relic if she can meet him, saying he'll say hi to him. And he says that's a good idea, and the protagonist tells him to take her to him now, walking calmly through all those women. So Set keeps saying that now that they're bigger, it's more comfortable, saying he has a lot of space. And Anubis asks if they're using their power, and Osiris says yes, they had no choice. And Set says he doesn't know why, but the Raven Predator relic free. So Anubis is surprised, noting that this is why he defeated, and Set says yes, saying that the timing of that incident wasn't perfect, saying he should warn the other. But the protagonist appeared and rips the head off Set's. Relic then asks how the protagonist knew, and so the protagonist orders him to die, splitting Set in half. And in that moment, Osiris screams as he is torn apart, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to attack him as well, splitting Osiris along with breaking his hourglass, and he starts to think that this can't be happening. And so Anubis calls Osiris, desperate about what happened, but the protagonist attacks him too, completely shredding him and revealing the relic of Anubis. He then questions why the protagonist is doing that, and he says it's for no reason, ordering him to reopen the approval process, saying that he thinks the results of the last approval were wrong. Then Anubis says that he never made 2 judgments in a single year, and even if he reopens the approval process, he won't be able to pass. But the protagonist says there's no way around it. He assures that this won't happen, saying that he'll have to change the question unless he wants to be torn to pieces. Poor Anubis has no choice but to accept under pressure. At that point, the protagonist says that the relic of Anubis had no choice but to reopen the approval process, and the great scale, the 42 interests, reappeared in the same way as before. Then he says that not all of them were completely intact. Then he speaks of the first question, very small, close to the protagonist. He notices that he was much larger than before, telling him to shut up. Grabbing Anubis by the neck, he tells him to ask the questions he commands him to ask, and there goes the first one, asking if he stole from his neighbor. And Anubis doesn't understand anything, questioning what he's saying, because asking if he stole from his neighbor is too much, questioning what purpose the judgment would serve if the questions were asked in this way, and the protagonist questioning why he cares, saying that this is not a judgment, the afterlife, asking if he thinks he's dead. He orders him to repeat what he said, or he will die, threatening to tear him to pieces if he disobeys. Anubis then asks why, because humans don't want to control them, and asks if he doesn't care if he's torn to pieces. The protagonist says he will control him, but if that doesn't work, he will destroy him, and if he breaks him, it means they weren't meant to be together, questioning themselves, right? And Anubis has no other option but to ask if he committed theft, and the protagonist then tells him to speak louder, and Anubis questions whether he committed the theft. But the protagonist tells him to be careful. The protagonist, speaking with a sharp slap to Anubis's face, tells him to speak respectfully human. Anubis then questions whether the man committed the theft, and the protagonist affirms. The protagonist moves on to the second question, asking what the protagonist said. Anubis asks if he will repeat this process with each question, and the protagonist agrees. He then says he answered yes to all the questions, changing them to his advantage. Anubis's relic, trapped in the great tomb, cries as the approval process ends. He completes the mission given by the Great Tomb, and one of the 3 relics of the Great Tomb completely surrendered. He passes through the Great Tomb of Anubis's relic, and when he finally closes the tomb, he holds Anubis's relic in his hand. Several notifications appear, and he explains that because he obtained a divine rank relic, various messages have appeared saying that several things have leveled up, and because he defeated Egyptian relic of divine rank, his dominance over Egyptian relics increased, and due to the Anubis relic, his tolerance against deadly type relics increased, and his tolerance level increased to rank C, and he obtained the title of Tomb Raider to increase his tomb excavation skill. Beyond rank, he also obtained the title of Rogue Tomb Raider for slightly decreasing his affinity with relic, and increasing his tomb looting attributes, and the protagonist notices that the Raven had a lot of fun, rejoining where he should use those titles, and he says that leaving that aside, he will close the relic's tomb. Then everything begins to return to normal, and the whole city is rebuilding, while Kwon wonders if the Great Tomb is breaking, wondering if he really got the relics. That kid, then he thinks of Jorian, thinking that he is a frighteningly skilled person, and he's not a kid he can simply get rid of. If he can't kill him, he has to make him work for him. The system says that a part of the Great Tomb covering the earth has been defeated, and there isn't enough strength to maintain the Great Tomb, so it has completely disappeared from the world. The protagonist thinks he can finally breathe fresh air until Kwon calls him, saying he didn't recognize such skill, admitting he was very rude to him before, apologizing to the boy, and saying he wants to make him an offer, asking if the protagonist would like to work, but the protagonist remembers that he wanted to kill him, and Kwon says that was when they didn't know each other. He says the relics will change the world, and in this new world, people like him have the greatest potential. As president of TKBM, he promises the boy full support, and he must swim in bigger oceans, that he wants to increase his potential and skill by having the protagonist work for him. But as soon as he hears this, he gets very angry, telling him to have the courage to say work for him when he actually wants to work with the protagonist. He asks if this doesn't reveal his cruel thoughts, and of course, he's going to invest in him, but he'll make him reap all the rewards of that investment, then throw him away as if he were nobody whenever he feels like. He says all he wants is to use him, but he's saying he wants to work with, saying he could make even a dog laugh. Then Kwon realizes he knows these intentions, saying he's just common, asking why he's so sensitive, D saying that at this moment, he has more than he deserved, and therefore it might seem like he's working for two, because it's bad to expect results from your investment, saying that one hand washes the other, and that's how the world works. And the protagonist notices that he even seems like an old snake, so Kwon tells him to think about it, saying that he would have to go through several dangers, like this one, to be able to collect the relic, and it might be difficult to handle everything alone, and if he ends up getting hurt, he can hire hospital, like his connections and his company, but the protagonist lightly cuts his neck, and then questions him about what he's talking about, if he's going to provide him with health insurance, saying that he can't just stand there listening to this old man's nonsense, saying that he still remembers the day that Buscania russica ended up in his hand, which is basically that tree he bought at the auction, and tells him that he treated him like a slave, using his illness as a bribe, and at that the old man smiles at the protagonist having cut his neck, saying that it surprised him, and it's very good, and it was extremely fat, and so it said that the spilled blood is returning to his body, and the cut was immediately reddened, and the protagonist, seeing that, can only find it disgusting, and he says that this is the power of the defensive relics he had, and the old man agreed, and the protagonist says that that is the body of Achilles submerged in the river Styx, and presumes it to be a relic of at least divine rank, and Achilles is a soldier who belongs to Greek mythology, and his mother was the ocean goddess, the Thes, and his father was a human Peleus, and the Thes wanted her son to be immortal like, so she submerged her son's body in the river Styx, holding Achilles' heel, and Achilles obtained a strong and resistant body. However, his heel continued to be weakness, and he says that Achilles died after taking an arrow in the heel, and being the relic of Achilles, this must be his weakness as well. The problem is that he doesn't know where this weakness is, because his neck returns even after being completely cut. The old man returns to normal. He asks if he now understands why he's below him, saying he understands that he's good, but he can't defeat him. He says he doesn't want to fight, and is trying to be his ally, asking if the answer isn't obvious. The protagonist then simply goes ahead, telling Muramasa to gather all his strength. She asks what he was doing, and he asks if she's ever heard of something called a revolt, saying that's what he's going to do. She says he's right, it's an obvious answer to choose to side with, but he doesn't want to, and he must just think he didn't like. The old man is increasingly surprised, and the protagonist says that Muramasa is also a perfect weapon for a revolt, and she becomes stronger the higher the rank of her opponent. Then he'll test if he'll shut his mouth after attacking him with the full power of the Muramasa, and the old man thinks he's crazy, asking why he's going so far, and cuts the old man in half. Hyun spits blood and is thrown back, but the protagonist realizes that this isn't enough, and while he's at it, the whole place explodes. Then the protagonist says that he attacked him with the full power of the Muramasa, and it's possible to produce several levels of power above what the relic originally had, but the relic will eventually break. And the old man already told you he was exaggerating, and he certainly wasn't wrong, and that was reckless, but leaving his enemy alone would be wrong. And the old man receiving that attack almost died. And he says that he thinks that because he felt threatened, the old man's relic activated on its own, and if he had considered the range of the relics, he would also have been in danger. And if he could have reacted a little to the impact with Hammurabi's code, it bombarded him more, and Hammurabi's relic was also slightly damaged, but the old man received absurd damage, and with him falling all messed up on the ground, the protagonist says that Achilles' relic and the relic of domination must have suffered a lot of damage, and he shouldn't be able to do anything for a while. But his Muramasa is completely broke, and Hammurabi's relic also suffered damage, and he says that he did all that and couldn't kill him, saying that this is irritating, very much so. But then, Sun Hongyu arrives calling Jory, asking what happened, and the protagonist is surprised that they are still there. Alive, questions why there's a dead guy there, but the protagonist says he even wanted him dead, but he isn't. Then Sun Hongyu asks if he's going to kill him, and the protagonist looks at him, telling him to leave him there, since he'll be stuck in the hospital for a while, noticing that there's no way to kill him anyway. He says he's hungry, so he calls them over to get something to eat, saying he doesn't know if there are any restaurants that survive the impact, but the boy asks the protagonist to wait for him. The protagonist also tells them to speak properly, as his patience is running out, so they start calling him Sir again. Meanwhile, a reporter interviews some people, saying that the damage caused by the anomaly is beginning, that they're receiving reports of people seeing monsters, and one of the men there says that dead bodies came out of the ground, and that they were monad, a slang term for female genitalia, and he wishes it was all just a movie. It's said that some people used superpowers with strange objects, so the protagonist observes them all, saying that the world knows about them. The protagonist then asks about the relics, and Sun Hongyu explains that he placed them on the bed. The boy asks if those are the relics, and the relics begin to speak. The protagonist then says he predicted the world would change completely, and that people possessing good relics would assume power from now on. The relics remain behind the protagonist, talking and playing. Sun Hongyu asks if they aren't about to break, and the protagonist says that's the problem, but he has a solution, saying he has some friend. The boy asks what he means by friend, and the protagonist makes a call to Irene, explaining that he knows it's not the perfect time, but he found a way to undo his curse, and she gets all happy, but the protagonist thinks, of course not, but it's not a complete lie, and he has to be more proactive, find a solution to undo this curse, and he says yes, saying that she just needs to find someone, saying that he was hoping that person could help him with that, and she says of course, asking who that person, and the protagonist then talks about Yahello, a specialist in relic restoration, and every relic can be destroyed because of its durability, or because of its reckless use, and there's no way to recover a relic after it's destroyed. However, some relics have the power to restore others. And the people who can use these relics, they were called relic restorer, and Yahello was part of the elite among these restorers. He basically monopolized the market, and he was called the king of fraud. Eventually, he caught the attention of his quant, and they were in the same tomb raiding group, and he has to make him work for him now, so relic restoration won't be a problem for him anymore. The protagonist will meet with Irene, thinking that this girl must think being punctual is a joke. Then, Sungwoo asks who this guy is that he has to meet, and the protagonist mentions Yahello. But the boy asks if he isn't better at relics, and the protagonist says but relic restoration is a treacherous task, saying that most relic restorations are on the artistic side. They require extremely high affinity, and he'll end up with a huge headache try. And if he can't do it, someone will do it for him, and that's simple. It's the vision of a slave trader, and Sungwoo, seeing the way he's talking, already gets scared. Then, Irene appeared, and he says he's a little late, saying he'll come down as quickly as he can, but she arrives in a helicopter. Everyone is surprised, and the girl says she wasn't very far, but the traffic was terrible, and she tried to come as quickly as possible, apologizing for being late. The protagonist is surprised that she even has a private helicopter, because as he thought, the girl is in a completely different class. He says it's okay, saying they'll talk somewhere else. Then she asks who the person he's looking for, and he says it's a Korean man named Yahello, asking if she happens to know him. She says no, saying she's never heard of him, and the protagonist says she might not know him because he's using a false identity. He asks if she knows anyone who collects art, and she says her brother collects it, and he even meets people with the same interest. The protagonist says that's good, mentioning that he can talk if he's interested in that area, saying that he's like that, asking his brother to ask someone if they know someone similar, and then seeing Yahello's portrait. She questions if he's sure he's looking for, and the protagonist says yes, questioning why, and asks if the girl knows him, and she says of course she does, saying that he tricked her brother a month ago, and the protagonist is quite surprised by it, and she says that she saw him when she went to visit her parents' house, then says that she remembers him because he was handsome, and was really surprised when she saw that her brother was tricked by, and says that her brother bought a work of art from him that turned out to be fake. 20 people ended up buying the same artwork with his brother, but the protagonist isn't even surprised. After all, he was the king of fraud. He'd been robbing people before. Then she says she doesn't think she'll be able to find him, and the protagonist is surprised. She says she heard he died, and the protagonist is even more surprised because he was caught trying to scam his brother's friend. The girl's brother saw this with his friends and doesn't know if the brakes failed or if he was going too fast. His car fell off a cliff after hitting the guardrail, and even the police said he was dead. But the protagonist is surprised about Jair Asta being dead, saying it doesn't make sense, because he must be 26 years old now, and 5 more years would have to pass before he met her. And it doesn't make sense for him to be dead now, wondering if the future has changed. And now that he's stopped to think, not everything happened the way it was before he died. And the relic that caused the appearance of the Great Tomb was Indian, and this time it was Egyptian, and events aren't happening the same way as in the past. But that can't be happening, because he really needs his ability. But she says they'll still try to look for him. But she questions what he's talking about, asking if he's saying the boy might be alive. And the protagonist says he's tough, and they have to have some hope. If they look carefully, there's a list of people who died, and I think he didn't die, but I'm not going to say, because I don't have proof. And while he's in the hospital, Seokyun saw the newspaper saying that the anomaly that occurred worldwide had characteristics similar to tombs that started appearing recently. And the journalist says that in the next segment, the government decided to do research on the relics, and Kwang gets angry with those guys, asking when they'll get tired of talking about this subject, and says that he worked so hard to keep the existence of the relics a secret, and it was all in vain because of Mr. Jo Ryeon, and he says he has to kill that boy, but questions why his body isn't recovering, and one of his men tells him he needs to calm down. But then another man arrives, questioning what happened, noting that President Kwang doesn't look very well, and he sees that it's Edward, and the old man immediately tells the other man to go outside, and he says that Kwang has been very active these last few days, and even summoned a tomb of that size, and he swears on everything that is sacred that he didn't know there was a tomb at the airport, saying it was an accident. But he says that doesn't matter now, and it also doesn't change the fact that everything happened after he activated his relic, and says that he should be inactive for a while because his clients are irritated. But Kwang questions what he's saying, arguing that everyone already knows about, and he says yes, besides, he was the one who gave them this information. Then he questions why he would tell them this, and he says that he's not just an arms dealer, he also sells information. At that point, Kwang understands, saying that he doesn't care about gaining their trust then, and he says that he has to distribute accurate information to gain people's trust, and says that if he makes a mistake, his job is to correct. But look at him, asking why he's not healing, saying that he knows he has a relic of mortality, but he says he doesn't know why, but it's not working, and the relic must have suffered some damage, and he says it's all because of that wretched Jorian. But Edward, upon hearing about this boy, thinks he seems interesting, noting that he managed to identify a relic of mortality in that, saying that the damaged relic is his problem, and he just needs to fix it. Then he questions what Edward is talking about, asking if there's any way, and Edward says he'll give him the contact of a relic restorer, and he just needs to keep collecting relics so that he can continue acting as his media, and tells him to take care of himself. Meanwhile, Kwon remains quite frustrated, and outside, Edward orders his subordinate to research this Jorian of his, and the boy agreed. Meanwhile, the relic restorer is informed of his hideout, asking who is calling him because he lost his concentration link, and he notices it's Edward. When he answers, he speaks to him and says it's been a while. Edward asks what miracle happened for him to answer so quickly, saying that for Jor here to answer the phone immediately means he's broke. The boy immediately says he knows him well, explaining that he was caught forging works of art, so he's faking his death, and his car broke down. He had to pay to keep some people quiet, and he can't go out, and this is driving him crazy. Edward is surprised, as he's already faked so many things, and now he's faking his own death. The boy asks if that's a compliment, saying he'll take it as such, but gets straight to the point, asking if he called about work. Edward says yes, saying a request for relic restoration just came in. The boy says he doesn't like those jobs because restoration is too tiring, but Edward asks if he thinks it's easy to get money, saying that the person who requested it this time is one of the big shots. Kwon Joao, the president of TKBM, is surprised and questions if he's serious. Edward asks what he thinks, since he won't have to worry about not getting paid this time, and the boy is overjoyed, saying he'll definitely accept. Meanwhile, the protagonist goes to the address Irene sent him with SCU Angu, asking if he really believes he's alive. The protagonist says he's not so easy to kill, inviting them inside. Inside, the receptionist welcomes him, and the protagonist asks if Jair Rai is there today. The girl is surprised but apologizes, saying that SCU Angu isn't in the office. The protagonist agrees, saying he can feel him and also sense the energy of a relic. But SCU Angu interrupts, causing trouble, asking if he's really not there, asking if he's pretending to dead. The protagonist asks what the hell that idiot is doing, but he tells the protagonist they have to make talk. The protagonist says they're there to betray Yojo, ordering them to use his head. He begs the woman's forgiveness, but she says she doesn't know why they're there and shouldn't act this way, saying that the president died in a car accident. But the protagonist places a suitcase on the table, surprised that Yojo has passed away. He asks what he's going to do with all of it, baiting her, and she questions what it is. When she looks inside the suit, she sees that they are relics, realizing there are more than 10 of them, some of which appear to be of high rank. The protagonist can read in her face that this is what she thought, and he says that they will put an end to it. Then he asks if she recognizes what they are, asking her to help, saying that they are all very valuable but broken, and it doesn't have to be President Yojo but someone to restore them. He says that since she works for Yojo, she must be very good, asking what she thinks, questioning if she can restore his relic. She thinks for a moment, asking for just a sec, saying she has to go to the bathroom, saying it will be quick. The protagonist says he will be there waiting. Then he says that he knew she was going to do that because this girl is called Yomi, Yojo's secretary, and she's just as greedy as he is. And she wasn't going to waste the chance to get her hands on those relics. And Yojo, he certainly wouldn't that she's alive. So she calls the boy, saying they have a problem there, saying it involves relics, and he asks what she's talking about. She says someone came asking him to restore their relics, so he tells her to send them all away because he's negotiating with TKBM now, and that will keep him busy for a while. But she says that's not it, saying he brought more than 10 relics, and some even seem to be Egyptian relic of divine rank. The boy is shocked, and she says they seem easy to deceive, questioning what he should do. He thinks this is tempting, saying that's right, saying he thinks he'll consider it as earning extra money, telling him to take the relics and bring them to the restoration, saying he'll be there soon, and he'll make perfect forgeries and swap them with the real one. Then she returns to talk to the protagonist, apologizing for keeping them waiting so long, and the protagonist just said, everything is fine, and she says that, since she sees his problem is urgent, she will restore them. The protagonist simply thanks her, and then she asks if she can take the relics to the restoration to check if they are in the right condition, saying they need to check them with some. Su Angulo is surprised, while the protagonist says of course, but the boy tells the protagonist that all his relics are there, asking what he will do. He runs away with. The girl tells the protagonist to take a look at the estimated price and the contract while he waits. He says that a good bait catches a good fish, but the boy says he can't handle things now that given everything. The protagonist thinks he's right, telling him to consider it a gamble, then says he'll see if his plan works or not. Protagonist, you're bluffing, right? You forgot. That sour face you made when he said that, really forgot. If you don't have a script under your arm, you're in big trouble, right? And when Yuja digs all that up, he says that they really hit the jackpot this time, saying it's good that she called him because some of them seem to be high rank, and she asks if they're sure they won't get caught because he thinks one of them is part of a gang or something, and he says of course they are, saying she can keep watching because he'll make a fake relic in an instant, and the girl agreed. And then he says that this one will be easy, saying that there's this guy over there, and he says it's the secret signature of a fake painter who shocked the world, a rank B Esper type relic, and the protagonist thinks that this is the relic that Yuja must have, and he's going to make a copy of his relic using it and steal the real one. And if you simply touch the relics while holding the secret signature, you'll be able to make a perfect forgery, and this forgery relic can not only copy the shape, but also some functions of the relic, and the forgery relic produces this is done using his own aura, which prevents anyone from noticing the difference for 12 hours, but he's living for the second time. And then Su Anvil asks what the heck this is, questioning whether it's a relic restoration, usually that expensive, since it's 10 billion won for a tiny scratch, saying it's robbery, and the protagonist says it doesn't matter, saying he won't pay anyway. But then the girl comes back apologizing because he made him wait so long, and the protagonist says that everything is fine, asking how the relics are, and she says she begs 1,000 pardons, but the relics are very damaged, and she doesn't think she can fix them, saying that those there are on the verge of being destroyed. But the protagonist asks if that's the case, throwing everything up in the air and scaring the girl, asking what kind of nonsense this is. Mr. Anvil asks why he is so suddenly agitated, and the protagonist said that this woman dared to exchange his relic for fake, and she sees that things have gone wrong, and the protagonist complains about what he's doing to her, and she starts trembling completely, begging the protagonist's forgiveness, and revealing that the real ones are in that room, and she swears that it wasn't her asking to spare her life, and while that's already wrong, she wonders how he found out, thinking that she has to get out of it, but the protagonist bursts through the door with throwing the girl far away, and he feels a terrible headache, and the protagonist enters saying that he got her, sending his rope. The boy is tied up, and he questions what it is, asking if he has more relic. When he grabs the rope, he asks the protagonist to untie him, but the rope keeps asking him to play with, inviting him to have fun. The protagonist asks where his things are, and he says he put them in the safe, telling the protagonist to take the thing off and asking him to untie him. But the protagonist tells him to shut up because he's going to get his things first, and he doesn't believe, asking how he knows his password, asking if he came there to do this on purpose. The protagonist asks if it mattered because he's the one who made the mistake, and the protagonist thinks that this guy is already screwed because he already knew he was a forger. Now, making a mistake used to be different. He lived a normal life, being a skilled artist, and not just normal. He went to a renowned school in the United States to do his painting, but he lost the artistic style he developed after investing so much time, effort in drawing to no one. Unlike his doc, his name was Richard Chong, and he became a world-famous artist using a stolen artistic style. Protesting made no difference, because, since he wasn't known like his doc, he lost his career, and everyone thought he was just being envious. He changed from then on, and started using his talent to deceive. Then the forgery Relic approached, and that helped this damned fraudster a lot. The protagonist says he could have had a real conversation if he weren't so screwed. He won't be able to persuade him if he's really like. The boy questions what he did wrong, saying that he's the idiot for being deceived, saying he hopes he gets castrated, and cursing the protagonist with every name under the sun. And his patience runs out, thinking he'll never persuade him. And the protagonist even asks if he knows what relic that is, and he says it's called Shakespeare's pen, saying that it will make anything he writes happen. Then the boy asks what he's going to do with it, and the protagonist says that today, at about 16 years old, he almost died of pain while tied up with a rope, and the source of the pain came from between his legs, and all three of them share the pain he's feeling. And the boy struggles, and the protagonist asks what he thinks, since this is his novel, and the boy shouts, calling him crazy, apologizing, saying that he won't charge you anything for the repair. The protagonist says he'll do whatever he wants, but asks him to spare him, and the protagonist realizes it's working well, and says of course he won't charge him anything, telling him to make a deal with, and then he'll let him live. The boy then asks about this, and the protagonist ends up signing the master-slave contract. The boy thinks there's no chance he'll be his slave, and the protagonist says that slave is a strong word, and an exclusivity contract is a better word, but the boy doesn't feel that it makes much difference, since he'll have zero repair fee, and he has to go when he's called, and can't take any other requests from anyone else. Besides, he has no say in anything he does, questioning what the hell this is if not a slavery contract, and even the code of Hammurabi will kill him if he doesn't follow the agreement. Everyone there is in the same boat, and the protagonist says that his friends there will explain everything, telling them to calm down, reading the contract to the end, saying that it's not so bad, asking, what's the contract fee, saying it's $6 million, and he'll also give you extra every time you restore a relic, and he'll provide food, clothing, housing, comfort, and security for the duration of the agreement, meaning he'll take care of you from now on. So, where in the world would you find a deal like? But the boy asks if he even has the strength and skill to accomplish all of this, saying he doesn't know if he's lying, and tells him that this isn't worth running away. Then, Sungwoo asks if he has to go after, and the protagonist says yes, saying he didn't know there was another door, telling him not to be so crazy, thinking that even though he learned using the agreement, he still has to get his heart, and the use of force to dominate has limits, and he will obtain a divine rank relic. The boy ends up running, calling someone, and calls President Kwon, introducing him as Jaiha, saying that he must have heard of Ed, and he says yes, saying he didn't know he would call so soon, and says that of course he had to contact him right away. Kwon thanks him for that, and the boy says he heard that he wanted him to restore a relic, and says he will. Kwon then orders his subordinate to turn off the TV, saying that it's already over. It's been a long time since something went so well, and they're saying they'll finalize the details of this agreement. But then, just as they're about to close the deal, a commotion starts on the other end, and the boy asks someone to stop, to let him go, and starts cursing all of the protagonist's henchmen. The protagonist tells him to hand over his cell phone, and so he speaks to President Kwon, surprised that it's him, since it seems the gentleman also needs to repair some relics, and he recognizes that voice, and the protagonist says it's a shame, because Heiha is his personal repairman now, telling him to have fun, looking for another one, cursing President Kwon, and he gets pissed at the protagonist, calling him a bastard, noticing that it's him again ruining his plans, and then Heiha asks, what's wrong with the protagonist, and he says that's what he's asking if he wants to side with Kwon. There's John, asking if the boy is an idiot, so he doesn't understand, and the protagonist tells him to carefully hide what he wants, because the only thing he hopes to follow is John, it's death, and he's the only person he would want to side with. But the boy says it's okay, asking why the hell he would have to work with a random guy. A guy who just destroyed his off and made a huge mess. But the protagonist, he realizes the boy is being incredibly annoying, and it seems he'll have to persuade him another way. So he pulls up a chair to talk properly, introducing himself, saying he's from Seoul and what he does. He explains that he's the head of a new excavation and is planning to give the boy a job as a repairman. He talks about the boy, but Yahello asks if he thinks introducing himself will change anything. The protagonist notices he's actually paying attention, that he's a man who wants to improve things. Then he takes out a note, saying that if the boy doesn't want to, he'll do it for him. He says his name is Yahello, and he's an art student who used to study abroad. He used to be a fantastic artist with a great passion for art, but now he's part of the school and is deceiving people with his fake paint. The boy says he doesn't know what he's talking, but the protagonist says he doesn't need to hide it, as the news has already spread everywhere. The protagonist is copying the art study, and that's something else entirely, just like the famous artist Richard. When Richard's name is mentioned, the boy gets angry, standing up and going after the protagonist, telling him to shut up because he doesn't even know what real art is. But the protagonist stops stops him with just one hand. Then, the boy says that it was that damn Richard Cop, and the protagonist asks if he's serious, questioning if it was Richard Cop. The boy says yeah, but the protagonist says that art isn't something you can simply copy-paste. The boy says of course not, saying that's why he didn't last long forging paint. But that guy copied even what he was thinking, and it was as if he had read his mind, and that can't be true. But the protagonist says it can, and the boy doesn't understand any. The protagonist says he should know that, since he used relics for, and if he uses one relic, that's certainly possible, and he is a relic user, and the relic's power will transform him into anyone he wanted, and he can perfectly copy knowledge and skill. But the boy asks how the protagonist is so sure of that, and Giorgio says he has a lot of knowledge about relics, and asks how about this, saying he'll recover the art and reputation that Richard stole, and the boy is surprised. But the protagonist says that in exchange he will work for him, asking if it's not a good deal, thinking to himself that it's because that's what he wants most, and the boy is surprised to get his artistic style back, and the protagonist thinks it's over, because he won't be able to refuse anymore. But the boy asks him to wait, asking him to give him more time, because he wants to think it through, and the protagonist is surprised that he still has something to think about. Then he says that since they've reached this point, he asks if he wants to see CKBM. He'll do the same, but the boy says no, and the protagonist tells him to do whatever he wants, throwing his cell phone in his face, saying that he doesn't like being compared to that old man, but he respects his opinion, and the boy says he's right, saying that he's not that stupid, and even if he acts like he's good, he doesn't believe it. But the protagonist tells him to take that too, throwing a necklace in the boy's face, saying it's a relic that will protect, and if he works for him, the protagonist can't let him get hurt. So the boy thinks that even if he says all that, he won't choose, because if the contracts are under the same condition, the president with one is 100 times better, and the the protagonist thinks that, without a doubt, this is something complicated, because the next day, he went straight to a meeting he had arranged with Kwon Taejong, and President Kwon says it's good to see him in person, asking if he has a condition, and the boy asks if he knows Jean Richard, and he says of course he does, saying that he is a world-famous artist, and he is known for being much more than a genius, asking what he has. Then the boy says that that man took everything, and he used a relic to copy exactly what he does, and thus achieved his current reputation, asking Kwon to please expose him, and if he does so, he will sign a contract with President Kwon. But then the president starts laughing, saying that this is interesting, saying that, unfortunately, it seems he chose the wrong person, talking to Richard, saying that he just heard a very interesting story, asking if he knows Yo Jae Ha, telling Richard everything the boy said, and he says that the reason the protagonist let him go was because he knew that contract would never be signed, since that old man is very close to Jean Richard, and well, they're not just close, he was a crucial member of Pandora who emerged in the so Richard talks to Jae Ha, asking if he hadn't told him to play dead, if he didn't want to be killed for real, asking if the humiliation wasn't it. Then Kwon tells Richard to calm down, saying he'll take care of it, and the protagonist says that that damned Yo Jae Ha probably wants to cry now, but Kwon says that as he can see, the two of them have a good friendship. But the boy says he didn't know that, asking him to forget his story, but Kwon tells him to stop right there, asking when he said he could leave. Then, one of the security guards grabs the boy by the neck, and he starts begging the security to let go, but Kwon orders them to make sure they don't break any, because he has work due. Then the boy asks what kind of moth this is, saying it's kidnapped, but then he remembers the relic the protagonist gave him, putting that relic. The protagonist moves forward, thinking it's an attack relic, but nothing happened. The boy is surprised, but the protagonist says he appeared when the boy was most desperate, and this time he'll say with absolute certainty that he'll stay by his side. That was the goal of that plan, and he thinks that besides succeeding, the boy has fallen in love. Oh, protagonist, this kind of manipulation is ugly, okay? This kind of manipulation is ugly. Okay, he had to, well, break the kid so he could learn that the world isn't a bed of roses, but this kind of manipulation is ugly, okay? And Kwon keeps asking what the protagonist is doing, and he says it's an operation for him to rescue, telling the boy to get up quick. Then Kwon continues cursing Jory, asking if he's going to do it again, and the protagonist talks to the old man, saying he's not there to cause trouble, he's only there to take that guy away, asking what he wants, asking if he wants to fight with a broken relic. But the old man tells the boy to go to hell, asking what the guys there are doing, order them to finish off that wretch quick, but the protagonist says no, he leaves the choice, picking up Shakespeare's pen to write, and the boy notices that, and the protagonist says that the security guards who went after Yojera are going to suffer immense pain before they die, and the pain came again in the middle of his leg, and so, after the protagonist commits yet another of his evil deeds, he takes the boy to his apartment. Upon arriving, Yojera asks what he wants with, and the protagonist says that of course he wants the relics repaired, and that he's the repairman for his tomb raiding group. But the boy says he said it was an excavation group, but the protagonist says he lied, and he had to convince him, and he chose a more normal word to describe what it was. The boy continues calling him a liar, but the protagonist tells him not to call him, telling him to call him leader with respect. But the boy says he's younger younger than him, insulting the protagonist in every way possible. But the protagonist punches him, telling him to shut up and get to work, and the boy just agreed. The protagonist then orders him to repair all those relics in 3 days. But the boy says that's impossible, asking how he's going to manage fix them all in just 3 days. The protagonist tells the boy he needs at least a month for each relic, but realizes he's too slow. He asks if repairing relics usually takes this long, and the boy replies, of course, saying he doesn't think the protagonist understands the complexity of the work. He adds that all his relics are in terrible condition, and in his case, even a year isn't enough time to repair them all. The protagonist replies that the boy is lying too much, asking if he feels guilty or anything, questioning if he plans to work once a week or something. The boy denies it. The protagonist then asks if he can prove that repairing relics quickly is possible. The boy doesn't understand, and Giorgio asks if he can keep up with that speed. The boy asks how he can prove it, and the protagonist says he'll show him, simply lending him the repair relic. He explains that having the repair relic doesn't mean he'll automatically repair, telling the protagonist to try. The protagonist then sees that it's the paint from the flower garden of the ocean palette. ANCB asks how much durability had, because if he uses it, the charge might be consumed, and the boy says he has enough, telling him to stop admiring the brush and start, saying that if he fails, he will have to give him a month for each relic, and the protagonist questions what he will do if he succeeds. Then the boy says he will put his salary on the line, and the protagonist is then happy, saying that he shouldn't say things so easily. After he succeeds, the boy can't believe it, asking what monstrous speed this is, and why he is so good even at repairing relics, and the protagonist actually manages to do it at time, and says that he won, and the boy thinks it's impossible. The protagonist asks why he needs him, since he's so good at it, saying he can do everything himself. But the protagonist tells him to take a look at the relic, and the relic starts complaining to the boy, talking about that horrible power of domination, telling him to go away. Then the protagonist says that he and the repair relics don't get along, and he can get along with these guys if he has high sociability. He notices that the durability has actually decreased quite a bit, even though he's only used it once. But he tells the protagonist that he still can't work that fast, saying he really doesn't think he's the repairer the protagonist wants, but he tells the boy to stop. Instead of complaining and going to work, saying that he improves with time. But then he gets annoyed that the protagonist won't leave him alone, and he says that in any case, the person he hired wasn't, but rather who he will become, telling the boy to work hard because he will get better, and he guarantees it. The boy asks what the hell this is, questioning if he's a psychic, but then he receives a call from Edward. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks if the elixir plan is doing well, and the boys say yes, saying it has calmed down. The protagonist says it's great, telling them to keep it up. But then he receives a notification from the crow, and his artisan skill rises to rank C. He can adapt and learn how to use any object he touches, and he also gains the title of restoration. With this, new skills are unlocked, and rank F tomb restoration is discovered. The protagonist wonders what kind of skill this is, since tombs crumble when the relic is capped, so what will he do with an empty tomb after restoring it? But while he's thinking about making a mistake today, someone approaches him saying that an acquaintance insisted to give him the phone number. When the protagonist answers, someone speaks to him, and he recognizes the voice, acknowledging it's Ed. The boy asks how they know each other, and the protagonist explains that, obviously, he's a man who received the title of the King of the Rich, an Englishman and a major investor in the relic market, and he's probably already acting as a mediator between relic users within the market. Edward is surprised that he knows him, saying this is getting interesting. The protagonist says this guy will give him important information, but most of the time, along with the information, bloodshed. Edward then says he was told about a skilled young man, capable enough to handle the CO, so naturally, he became interested, saying he'll recommend a new job to him, asking what the protagonist tells him to just speak, and Edward tells him to be patient because the price itself is quite high, but the protagonist says it doesn't matter, questioning how he'll decide if he doesn't even know what it's about. Edward then notices that he's not just anyone, saying it's alright, he'll explain. He says there's a bounty on a tomb in China, and if his excavation group joins, they'll give him a share of the reward, but on the condition that any relics they find will go to the Chinese government. He says he needs that relic theft, and the protagonist asks that's all. Edward says asking what he thinks, and that if everything goes well, he'll consider giving him VIP membership, but the protagonist says he won't consider it, he'll give him the position, then asks who made the request, demanding to know everything. Old Coensis is quite surprised, and the protagonist tells him not to underestimate, as he knows a lot. He wouldn't mess with the Chinese government just because he wants some relics, and says that means someone asked him to do it, asking who this guy is who wants to cause such a mess. Edward finally realizes that he's not an ordinary guy, saying he'll tell him everything he knows, explaining that it's a request from Kira Clark. The protagonist is quite surprised to hear that, and he mentions that she's a general in the American army, and she's responsible for all related missions. of relics, and it is a frightening woman who receives I have the title of Queen of War, and he doesn't want to get involved with this woman so soon, nor does he want to help. So he talks to Edward, but Edward says she's collecting geographical relics, and apparently the relic in this tomb is geographic. The protagonist thinks it's true, since the Queen of War has monopolized geographical relics, and a geographical relic would be very useful. Edward says that's all, asking what the protagonist is going to do. Edward accepts the proposal, and the protagonist takes the first flight. Jair Rafa tells him it's ridiculous, asking why they're already, since they just accepted the job. The protagonist says that since they accept they're going, but he notices that he boarded the plane as soon as he hung up the phone. The protagonist tells him to repair the relics, since he has so much time to talk. Irene arrives, saying she hopes the seats are comfortable, and the protagonist notices that she is. Also there, he mentions that thanks to her, they were able to get a plane so easily, and he says that since all the airports there were destroyed, which was really bad, Jair Rafa thinks beautiful, but ends up noticing that he's seen her somewhere. The protagonist sends his regards to her, as she lent them her private jet, and the boy says it's a pleasure to meet her. She replies that the pleasure is her, calling him a con art. The protagonist reveals that she is Irene Hilton, asking if he's heard of her, and if he has anything against her, he'd better speak up, since he'll be hearing a lot from her from now on. He's surprised that she's from the Hilton family, and so he apologizes for his mistakes, asking her not to hand him over to James Hilton. The girl agreed, but the protagonist asks her to threaten him a little, saying that this guy is very laid back, and he even wanted a whole month just to repair a relic, even though he put her to work. He's working, all he thinks about is a worldly job, and the girl questions if he's serious about it, and he asks the protagonist not to do this to. The girl says that this man is an important business partner, and he needs to work hard if he wants her to keep quiet about her brother, and he just agreed. But the protagonist says she doesn't need to be so rigid, saying that this boy will also help solve her problem, and from now on, she must learn how to use the relic. She's surprised, and the protagonist says that the relic that brings bad luck is a parasite, and it lives inside his body, which means they won't be able to remove it completely. So ideally, she should learn how to manipulate and use it, and they are looking for a definitive solution. But why not try to do everything possible for now? And he says he uses dominance, and he uses socialization to control the relics, and she needs to learn both methods little by little. And even though it's difficult to learn her relic because of its strength, they are trying to minimize the problem, and in that she simply agreed. Meanwhile, in Macau, the girl's bad luck begins to affect everyone, with one person questioning why all the stocks he bought are falling. One of them warns them not to buy any more for a while, or else they'll go bankrupt. Then the protagonist says that 2/3 of Macau has already turned to ruin. The entrance is near Taipa Island, and the bridge leading to the island. It is compromised, and that is certainly a sign of the relic, because the only remaining way is by boat, and he says the problem is figuring out if this relic has any kind of connection boats. Then the boy starts cursing, and the protagonist asks what's wrong. He says his relic disappeared, and the protagonist questions how he could have done that. But then several people start losing relics around them, and the protagonist receives a notification saying that a thief is after their relic. He even loses one himself, as 3 of them were stolen. He thinks this thief isn't so bad, but he left the most useful one behind, ordering the rope to tie up the scoundrel. Then the rope moves away and the boy asks the protagonist if they stole any of his relics too. He says that unless you can teleport, you won't be able to escape the rope, and he notices that the rope hasn't returned. He goes to see if they've caught the thief. Meanwhile, someone is trapped, but inside the women's bathroom, and the boy tells the protagonist. The protagonist says it's a shame, because he heard the noise coming from there, and the thief is tied up by the rope, and the rope calls to the protagonist, revealing that the thief is indeed her. The protagonist is surprised, and Jair Ray asks if he knows the girl. He explains that this girl is using Medusa's relic and works for the American government. Jair Ray becomes terrified, asking if he'll turn to stone if he looks into her eye, but the protagonist says there's no need to be afraid. The boy asks how he can't be afraid, asking what the heck is wrong with her hair. The protagonist simply snaps his finger, and the rope ties the girl's hair. He tells her it's no use, and she starts to calm down a little. He explains that before being cursed, Medusa was known for being a woman with beautiful hair, so how can he explain Medusa's beauty to that little girl? He says that if she wants to fully use Medusa's relic, she has to be a fully grown adult, and the protagonist says that even though she's a child, he won't. Take it easy, saying that it doesn't matter if she's just a little girl. A relic user is still a user, asking if she understands, and if she tries to play any prank, she'll suffer. Then the protagonist orders the rope to release her, and meanwhile, Garay thinks to himself that for some reason, it even seems like they are the villain. The girl is finally freed, still with a sullen expression, and the protagonist says she wasn't alone. She says yes, saying they have many, and she's going to report it. The protagonist then asks how many there are, and she says there are a bunch more from her school. The protagonist protagonist thinks there must be about 20, and says there seems to be a whole excavation, but asks why. Garay then says the United States left Edward in charge of IT.so he hired, asking if it wasn't already, and the protagonist thinks they're making sure the relic goes to United States, and they know how large the Chinese excavation, and considering how obsessed she was with it, this relic must be very useful, and it will be worth stealing. But then the boy questions the job, because the protagonist is changing the course of things a bit, and he says that of course they're going to lie, that he's going to cheat, but he says no, saying that they'll end up finding out, because they fooled the United States. No way he wants to do that. However, the protagonist just hits the boy, reminding him of the first page of the contract, paragraph 5. Saying that pawns do whatever the king commands, as the boy doesn't question anything he says or does, and he starts praying to his past self, telling him never to sign that contract. The protagonist, however, thanks the girl for the information, saying they'd better hurry before getting in his way, saying he thinks he'll shut her up because he doesn't want her talking about. But then he tells the protagonist he can't, saying he hasn't repaired the relic. The protagonist gets very angry, telling him to repair it as quickly as possible because he broke the code of Hammurabi while fighting that damned old man. It's not that he can't use it, he just can't use it with full force. So he tells the boy to listen, saying that if she gives it to her friends, she will suffer immeasurable pain, and the same goes for when she uses her relic. Then he tells the boy to get all the relics she had, but he doesn't like this very much because no matter how he looks at it, they are the villain. There, the girl questions what they did to him, and the protagonist leaves her lying in the bathroom, saying they can't waste any more time there. The boy replies that even so, why are they going to the tomb now? They don't have many relics repaired yet, and that wasn't part of the plan. The protagonist says he clearly told him to repair them quick, getting angry with the boy. Since they know the American excavation is there, they have to hurry. The boy asks if they're going empty-handed, but the protagonist says it's better than having the relic stolen right in front of him, saying he'll figure something out. But the boy asks if he even prepared himself for this crazy. Meanwhile, at the American camp, one of the agents is surprised that the girl lost all the relic brought, asking what the hell she did. But Linda Walker tells Thomas to calm down, saying that yelling at her will only make things worse. However, Thomas says they should never have put a child in their group, as all she does is ruin. The girl says she didn't ruin anything, and her name is Vivian Luce, also a CIA agent. Thomas doesn't understand what she's talking about since she lost all the relic, and asks what she calls them. She says they weren't lost, they were stolen. They are both surprised, and the girl realizes she's revealed too much, remembering when the protagonist told her that if she tells on them to her friend, she'll feel unbearable pain, and the same applies if she uses her relic. She remembers he said something about the pain, and becomes scared. When Thomas asks about them being stolen, she says she forgot, but he tells her not to joke around with him, and so Linda goes to the girl talking to Vivian, saying that she has to tell them the truth, and so they can prepare for what's to come, remembering that she said she would help, and the girl says yes, saying that there were 2 men, and then she starts to tell the story, but then the relic activates, and she notices that it tickles, starting to fall, laughing uncontrollably, and so she gets stuck, asking what she's doing, telling her to stop joke and tell them quick, but she notices that the unbearable pain is tickling, saying that she's glad it doesn't hurt, but she can't resist, thinking that this evil will end up killing her. Meanwhile, at the next entrance to Taipa Island, several ships arrive, and Gerard talks to the protagonist, who doesn't know anything anymore. They actually boarded the plane without any useful relics, but the protagonist orders them to retrieve all the relics they stole from the girl, because they might find something useful, but he says there's nothing useful, and Gerard thinks they're screwed. But then someone speaks to them, saying they brought many ships, and that they need that number of fleets to sail, at least, and he will allow them entry. They question what happened to the sky, noticing they've entered the tomb, and one of them asks what they're doing, saying they're in a state of emergency. Gerard asks what he said, wondering if they're in trouble, since he spoke in Chinese. The protagonist says he said the ships are being attacked by monsters, and the boy gets scared. Meanwhile, several other things come in, and humanoid fish jump onto ship's hull. They wonder what it is because they're throwing some, and those arrows hurt a lot. They even notice a snake biting with a tiny sting coming out of the water and going straight for them. The man's arm is pulled away, and then one of them tells them not to shoot because it's going to explode. The protagonist thinks that the one who fell is already gone, and says there are fewer of them than he thought, and they aren't that big. The boy asks if that's true, and he says it seems he won't need any relics since he has that stat. JR feels more relieved, thinking he doesn't need to worry about dying. But then, the 2 boats end up colliding after losing their direction, and the protagonist realizes they are losing stability. The boy tells him to look, noticing that they seem to possess. The protagonist realizes that if bitten, he'll end up being controlled, and the relic says that's exact because sometimes small variables annihilate expeditionary, and that's exactly how long journeys. But then, the boy asks the protagonist what they're going to do, and the protagonist sees that this is going to be annoying, urging the boy to run. But the boy reminds him that they're in the middle of the sea, asking where they're going to run. The protagonist says that while those idiots take care of the monster, he's going to start activating the relics, and says it's good that those guys are human too, and that's all he'll need. Then he uses Shakespeare's pen, writing that those controlled by the relics will all come to the conclusion that they're idiots and will lick the floor. And then they actually start doing what the protagonist said, and JRR questions what happened. The protagonist says that now they just need to take care of the monster. Then the relic says that the protagonist wasn't bad at all, but the protagonist questions why he feels like it's speaking direct, and the relic says that it expected nothing less from the man chosen by the Raven. The protagonist mentions that rumors about him have spread throughout all the relic, and JRR is surprised that the relics communicate each other. He says they are a bunch of attention seekers and probably surpass even humans in that regard. However, the relic says that the cursed human is an inner life form, and he even calls him needy, saying there's no need to worry, as little time remains even for his grotesque tongue, since all the relics will direct their eras against his arrogance. The protagonist says it would be great if they actually did that, as he would be grateful. JR agrees with him because that would mean the protagonist says they're coming straight for his bag and that they talk too much. He suggests they're coming after and that they should have set some kind of trap. The relic doesn't know what to say, and the protagonist starts teasing her again, asking why she won't tell him something else about the raven they talk so much about, questioning what it is, since the Egyptian relics also mentioned the raven, and it seems quite famous among them. She asks why he has to tell her this, telling him to think about it himself. But the protagonist notices she's annoyed and says he understands, since she can't tell him because she forgot. He thought relics were smarter than human, but this is disappointing. The relic ends up falling for his trick, saying she remembers very well how Janano Kamalhosa insulted her intelligence. The protagonist then tells her to prove it, thinking he's really stupid, and the relic ends up falling. His little chatter continues, and the protagonist is simply surprised when she throws a lightning bolt at the wave, shaking everything around. The relic explains that the raven was a highly respected divine relic, capable of devouring its enemy and taking their powers for itself. It was a strong companion, but suddenly it made a contract with some human and betrayed them all. Numerous relics were devoured by the raven, and others became slaves to that human. They couldn't stand by and watch the traitorous raven, so they imprisoned it. The protagonist is surprised by this, as it means the tomb he entered before dying was the raven's prison. He says he knew something strange was happening compared to other normal tombs, because if that's the case, then it makes sense that all the subordinates were annihilated. He says he thought the raven could devour other divine relics, asking how they captured that monster. The relic then laughs, saying that of course fighting it head-on would be a difficult task, but they managed to deceive the human, and humans are simple, and when they showed him something better than the crow, he abandoned it without hesitation. Thanks to this, they sealed the crow and even killed that idiotic human. He orders the protagonist to bow before his supreme strategy, but the protagonist merely observed, saying he doesn't care about the strategy, but he managed to extract good information. He says he was wondering who this meddling crow was, even questioning whether he should ally with, but after hearing this, he thinks he's a good ally. Then the relic questions what he's saying, asking if he paid the same attention to what he said, because siding with that crow means becoming an enemy of all relic. However, the protagonist says he doesn't care, saying he doesn't plan to become friends with idiotic relic. But then the relic screams, saying it can't take it anymore, saying everything is fine, ordering the protagonist to die, throwing even more monsters. JR then notices there are many more of them now, but the protagonist only thinks this is the second horde. The protagonist continues killing those things along with JRR and realizes it never ends. The boy notices they are being surrounded, and he says they don't even care about other people, only attack. The protagonist thinks that even with all this, they can defeat, but the boy notices a noise and realizes it's the protagonist's. It finally broke completely, and the embalming knight, which was destroyed, and the boy says that's why he told him to be careful, but the protagonist tells him to stop talking and run, because they don't have any other relics to fight, and the boy gets increasingly annoyed, and the protagonist calls him to go to the cabin, and says that without any more combat relics, he will have to give up, and then Gara questions what he's talking about, because he doesn't even know how. They're still alive, so he says that this is a very difficult tomb to conquer. Besides being gigantic, it also controls the sea, and it won't be easy for them to get out of, and that stupid relic got angry and started creating giant waves, and even sent subordinates after, and they smell bad too, and since he knows where it is, he just needs to find it, but he doesn't have any relics to get out of, and at least the back of the boat is empty, and they can escape from this. So, the protagonist tells him to look for any boat, and they will have the protagonist wants to cross the sea and retrieve the relic, but the boy asks if he knows how to steer a boat. Then, some people shout that they are thieves, and Thomas replies that those are the damned ones asking the girl if they were the ones who stole her relic. The protagonist notices the girl, and thinks that since they are with her, it means they are an American excavation. He also notices some familiar faces there, so they welcome them. The boy tells them to leave them there, but the protagonist says they have some cool thing, and that he'll take care of, telling him to find a boat and a rope. While the boy goes, Thomas lunges at the protagonist, asking if he stole his thing and saying he'll get them back. The protagonist asks who said he can take, but says that it seems they have some relics and others, asking how they deal with. Thomas says he'll finish the boy off, attacking the protagonist without warning, but the protagonist manages to dodge, noticing that he's quite fast for his size, but that Relic is probably of high rank, and he says he told him to deliver after elbowing him in the abdomen and punching Thomas in the face. But when he receives that punch, he doesn't fall, turning to look at the protagonist, even after being hit. Then he resumes chasing the protagonist, trying to hit him, and the boy runs away. And in that moment, when the protagonist is hit, feels the aura of the relic, noticing that, even though it looked like a metal pipe, it seems to have a sword inside, and he realizes he's screwed if an attack hits, and with that strength and speed, it's better to avoid a direct fight, and so he summons the silver axe, and Thomas notices that finally, he seems to understand the gravity of the situation, but says that this still doesn't change anything, attacking the protagonist once more, but the boy ducks and attacks Thomas again, forcing him to defend himself this time. The protagonist then asks if he really thinks that, ordering the axe to finish off any enemy that threatens his wealth, using the silver axe. In doing so, he loses all his clothes, becoming naked in front of the protagonist, who complains about what the hell this is, while the boy laughs at him and says he should have dodged, asking why he tried to block. Then, he grabs the pipe and orders it to reveal its true form. And the relic is the sword of the cave, the flowering plant. Granted, the protagonist receives a relic from the king of the brave Shing, a disposable relic with a durability 2,594 out of 5,000 possible damage. He says it's incredible. That sword seems invigorated, but then Jera shouts at, and the protagonist realizes he arrived just in time, telling the big guy that he'll make good use of the sword. But Marcos orders him back, telling the protagonist to return it. But several monsters appear near him, and he gets completely lost. So the protagonist just has to run away, laughing at himself. Jera asks where they're going now, and the boy tells him to keep going straight, as he'll show the way, saying it's good to have plenty of fuel. Jera doubts they have enough, and asks how far they have. The protagonist tries to estimate the distance they'll have traveled, but then they are hit by a rock, and Marcos orders them to stop right there, already getting dressed in another boat. They are shocked that their friends saved, and the little girl is very angry with the two of them, and then the protagonist says he'll try something else, throwing the rope over there, and the rope gets caught on Linda's arm. He tells her to throw the woman out of the boat, taking her with and throwing her into the water. The protagonist says they better catch her quick because that relic has spread monsters through the water to try and get her. Linda is left there almost drowning, and Marcos tells her to hold on tight, asking the girl to turn the boat around. But then, one of the men there says that if they turn it around, he'll escape, but Marcos says he ordered them to turn it around. He gets very angry, saying the protagonist will pay for everything he's done. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives at a small island, saying the relic is hiding right under that tree. He says they're almost there, and when they finally dock there, the protagonist's sword starts to react. The relic is surprised that he managed to find it, saying that if he wants to control it, he'll have to offer a sacrifice, demanding something that the protagonist is satisfied, but questions what she will do if he doesn't want, and the relic doesn't even have anything to say. The protagonist says it's time to eat, and she questions what he's doing. The protagonist says that now she must show him how sharp, throwing his sword. The relic starts screaming, but the protagonist makes a slash in her direction, and in doing so, the tree trunk is split. She thinks it's impossible that she's falling back. Then the protagonist observes the relic being revealed. It's a kind of map, the Western treasure map of Zenri, a rank A relic with a durability 2 out of 500. The protagonist is quite surprised by the relic and gets the question about Zenji wrong. The protagonist says that with the Western treasure map, he sailed all over the West conquering treasures. Zenri explored the North Sea under the command of the Ming Dynasty Emperor, and with over 60 fleets, he sailed to Southwest Asia, passing India, heading towards Africa. Historical texts say he returned with all sorts of treasure, and the protagonist clearly sees this as quite an achievement, telling him to repair that relic as quickly as possible, since cutting down the tree ruined its durability. But the boy gets angry, telling the protagonist to handle the relics with more care, please. But then the protagonist commands the relic close the tomb, and he says that now the heist is about to begin. So he goes to the Macau urban district, and the protagonist asks how long it will take him to make the fake relic, and he says that he has just begun, but speaks to the protagonist. He asks if they're really going to hand over a fake relic, as he still thinks it's too risky, questioning if it's really worth the risk since they're being well paid, and asking why they don't just hand over the relic. Irene says she also thinks it's too risky, saying it's better not to make too many enemies, but the protagonist says he's doing it because it's necessary, especially to solve her problem. She doesn't quite understand, and the protagonist tells her to try putting her hand on the relic. When she does, the protagonist commands the relic to listen, marking each place related to her badly. He realizes its work and sees Turkey being marked. He says it seems they'll have to go to Turkey to solve her problem, which is why they needed the map. Of course, he also wanted to use it for personal use later, but the boy says that even if they need it, it doesn't change the fact that the fake will disappear after some time, saying they'll surely be caught. They're talking about Kira Clark, and she will. They'll chase her to the ends of the earth, and the protagonist protagonist says that's exactly it, saying he's right, except for the fact that she'll chase them to the ends of the earth, and the boy doesn't quite understand. And the protagonist says that he's trying to monopolize the geographical relic, and she probably has a few more, so she'll locate the tombs and conquer them completely. And he knows one thing, because Columbus's map will be the most problematic among her relics, and when a place is marked, it gives her information about the tomb and the relic, and a lot of tombs around the world are already in her hand, and the one in Torquia is one of them, so going to Torquia in that situation is maddening. And he says that she won't just discover everything about his relic, but she'll certainly go after Irene, after her relic, and honestly, he doesn't have much to lose even with the relic. But with her it's a different story. She'll keep giving in to a powerful relic like hers, but since it's a parasitic relic, she won't be able to steal it direct, which means she'll do anything to get it, kidnap, blackmail. She has no limits. And in fact, this may have actually happened before he died, and there's no other way for someone like Irene to become the goddess of destruction. But he tells her not to worry, because he won't let anyone lay a finger on, and she gets all giddy. But Froda thinks she won't be defeated this time, because the power of the Queen of Destruction and the riches of the Hilton family will be his, and his true intentions are more rotten seen. So he says that's why they need to pull off this coup, and they need to provoke and lure him, and apparently Irene is somewhere there too. And when she discovers that the relic she obtained with so much effort is fake, she'll go crazy, and that's when he'll say he'll explain everything, and she'll probably meet with him, at least to kill him. But then Jera asks what he plans after meeting with, and the protagonist says he's going to destroy all her precious geographical relics. Then the boy and the protagonist says this plan is even more absurd, but he tells her to shut up because he's finished listening and he needs to get to work. He thinks that if he leaves her alone, sooner or later he'll run into her, and it's better to use this chance to finish her off once and for all. Elsewhere, at the Sia headquarters, one of the men asks if they're saying the tomb closed, and they couldn't even find the relic, but that means some idiot stole it, so they apologize. He then says that besides that, Thomas and Linda were captured by China, saying they really did an incredible job, but they tell them they didn't expect an attack. The other says they never thought a skilled user would show up, and they had no information about it. Then he asks if they're saying it's the headquarters' fault for not informing him correct, but he says no. Then another guy arrives, telling him he has a call from General Quira, and he's surprised she's already calling, telling him to prepare because they're dead. She asks what the mood is, telling him to cheer up because she's not angry, but the blonde guy doesn't understand it. Quira says they got the relic, so he asks how, since they definitely lost it, and she says, yes, they failed, but they used other means, saying it's kind of sad, and even having other hands, she wanted them to complete the mission. But the world-famous Sia failed a mission, and she made a request to Edward, and he managed to complete the mission. The exchange will happen, and they will start investigating this skilled user, asking if they can at least do it, and they all agree. Quira then says that her interest is very great and strong. Meanwhile, Yoja Era quickly finished the fake relic, and it was given to Edward. Then Edward probably passed it on to Quira, and since there was no confusion after the exchange, it seems that even Quira didn't realize it was fake. Thanks to this, Yoja escaped, focusing on repairing the relics, and some of his most used relic, along with the map, were restored. He told Irene to practice using her relic, and it was difficult to watch, but she's still a beginner.